Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain had begun as a soft murmur, distant and almost soothing, as though the forest itself was sighing. It came in waves, quiet at first, then a steady rhythm, tapping on the leaves, trickling down the branches and pooling on the damp earth below. The path ahead was barely visible, swallowed by the fog that clung to the trees, weaving in and out of view. Every step you took seemed to echo, though you couldn't quite tell if it was your own footfalls or something else, something following closely behind. The old lodge loomed in the distance, its shape barely perceptible through the mist. You had been hiking for hours, the path winding deeper into the woods with no sign of civilization. It was supposed to be a quick detour, a few days in the quiet of the forest, a break from the noise of the world. But now, as the night crept in and the fog thickened, the lodge felt less like a refuge and more like an invitation, one you couldn't refuse. The fire pit in front of the lodge was empty, the stones cold, but there was something comforting about the sight. You needed warmth. You needed a place to rest. A soft glow flickered from one of the windows, the only light for miles around. The door creaked open as you approached, inviting you inside. You stepped over the threshold, and the air inside was a stark contrast. Dry, warm, yet musty, with the faint smell of wood and something else, something older. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, the only sound that didn't belong to the storm outside. A figure, cloaked in shadow, sat in front of it, watching the flames dance. The figure's head turned slowly toward you. I wasn't expecting company," a voice rasped, its tone low, barely audible over the wind. The figure didn't move from its seat, just continued staring into the fire. The door closed behind you with a soft click, sealing you in. The rain pattered harder against the windows, but here in the lodge it felt safe. Still, an unease crept through you. "What brings you out here?" the figure asked, its voice soft but insistent. There was something unnerving about it, as though the answer to the question wasn't as important as the question itself. The fire crackled as you stepped further into the lodge, your boots leaving wet prints on the wooden floor. The figure by the fire was still, almost unnaturally so, as though it had been carved into the shadows of the room. You could see now that it was an older man, his face obscured by a hood, with a long, tattered coat hanging from his frame. His eyes, hidden beneath the folds of his hood, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the fire. You began, but the words caught in your throat. There was something about this place, this moment, that didn't feel right. The chill of the forest still clung to your skin, but the warmth of the fire did nothing to erase the growing sense of dread creeping through you. He didn't wait for you to finish. Instead, he reached over and took a nearby kettle from the mantel, pouring a thick, dark liquid into a wooden cup. "You'll need this," he said, his voice thick with a strange accent, one you couldn't quite place. You hesitated. The rain outside had picked up, the steady rhythm now a frantic pounding against the walls of the lodge. It was as if the world beyond the lodge was fighting to get in. You glanced at the door, wondering if you could make a quick escape, but something in the back of your mind told you that wouldn't be possible. Not now. The man held out the cup, his pale, knobby fingers wrapped around the rim. "It'll help you see the truth," he said, almost like a warning. You took the cup, your fingers brushing against his for a brief moment, and a strange chill shot through you, colder than the forest outside. The liquid inside smelled like earth and something bitter, like old wood mixed with damp moss. Without thinking, you brought the cup to your lips and drank. The liquid was thick and warm, sliding down your throat with an odd, satisfying weight. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the firelight around you began to shift, the shadows in the corners of the room elongating, twisting like they were alive. The air thickened, and a low hum began to vibrate beneath the floorboards, like the pulse of the forest itself. Suddenly, you felt it, a pull, a presence. You weren't alone anymore. "Do you feel it now?" the man asked, his voice low and insistent. He hadn't moved, but something about him seemed different, more alive, more awake. His eyes, once hidden in shadow, now gleamed in the firelight, two bright, unsettling orbs. You nodded slowly, not sure if you could trust your own senses. The world around you seemed to breathe, the walls shifting like a living thing, stretching, curling, and then snapping back into place. The air felt heavy, pressing down on your chest, and the fire crackled louder, almost in rhythm with your heartbeat. "Good," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "The forest speaks to those who listen. It's always been like this." You opened your mouth to ask what he meant, but before you could, the room around you seemed to blur, the flickering flames merging into strange shapes, shadows that didn't belong. The man's voice drifted from the edges of your awareness, as though he was speaking from a great distance. The forest is not as it seems, he continued. There are things here, things that live in the dark places, in the spaces between the trees. They wait for those who wander too far from the path. A loud crack echoed from the corner of the room and your heart jumped. You spun around, your eyes scanning the shadows. The man's lips curled into a thin, knowing smile. They are here, he said, standing slowly, his body creaking like old wood. They've always been here. And you've come too far now. The firelight flickered and dimmed, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. You could feel the weight of the forest pressing against the windows, the wind howling outside as if it were alive, pushing at the fragile walls of the lodge. For the first time, you realized that the fire might not be enough to protect you from whatever was lurking out there, just beyond the glass. The man stepped toward the window, his eyes locked on something outside. You followed his gaze, but there was nothing to see, just the blur of rain and fog, the dark outline of the trees swaying in the wind. Then, through the mist, something moved. It was too fast, too fleeting to identify, but it was there. A shape, darker than the night itself, darting between the trees. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but the unease settled deeper in your stomach. The man's gaze never wavered. You shouldn't have come, he said, his voice colder now, the warmth of the fire unable to touch it. But now that you're here, there's no turning back. The air grew thicker, and a low, guttural growl echoed from somewhere deep in the woods, far off but close enough to rattle your bones. The sound sent a wave of dread through your chest, a primal fear that made your skin crawl. The forest had awakened, and it was coming for you. The growl echoed again, louder this time. It wasn't the sound of an animal, not something you could easily name. It was raw, deep, and primal, like the forest itself was making its displeasure known. Your pulse quickened, and you instinctively stepped back toward the door, but the man's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. Don't go out there, he warned, turning his gaze from the window back to you. His eyes had changed, no longer just glowing, but now swirling with an unsettling depth, as if something far older than he was had taken root in them. Once you leave this lodge, the forest will never let you go. You swallowed hard, trying to steady your breath. The weight of his words pressed on you like the storm outside, relentless and overwhelming. The rain had intensified, the sound of it battering against the lodge's roof making everything feel even more enclosed, as if the walls were closing in. Then why am I here? You asked, your voice trembling despite your efforts to sound calm. Why did you let me in? The man's lips twisted into something like a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't let you in, he replied softly. The forest did. He turned back to the window again, his fingers brushing the glass as if tracing something invisible. It watches, he whispered, barely audible over the wind. It always watches. You were drawn here the moment you stepped off the path. You could feel the weight of his words, but there was something more pressing now. Something moving in the dark. A shift in the air, a subtle change that made your skin prickle. A strange sense of being observed. Your eyes darted back to the window. The rain blurred everything, but now you could see faint shapes moving just beyond the edge of the trees, like shadows too dark to be natural. They were tall, humanoid in shape, but with long, crooked limbs that bent at odd angles. Their heads were indistinct, just voids of blackness, their forms flickering in and out of view as they moved in unnatural synchronization. A cold rush of panic flooded you. What are they? You gasped, your voice cracking. What are they? The man didn't answer immediately. He simply turned back toward the fire, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. His voice, when it came, was low, laced with an edge of something like regret, or was it pity? They are the Watchers, he murmured. Ancient things that live in the spaces between the trees. They're not of the forest, but they are bound to it. And they have been waiting for you. Waiting for me? You repeated, your heart pounding in your chest. Why? The man nodded slowly, his eyes gleaming in the flickering firelight. Defeat. They hunger for what you bring with you, the fear, the confusion. They feed on that, and once they taste it, they won't stop until they've taken everything. A shudder ran through you as the floorboards groaned under the weight of something moving outside. It wasn't the wind. It was heavier than that, a slow, deliberate pace. The trees pressed against the windows like dark fingers, and the firelight wavered, casting strange, twisting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. You looked back at the man, your breath quickening. How do we stop them? You asked, your voice barely a whisper. The man stared at you, his gaze piercing and heavy. There is no stopping them. Not once they've set their sights on you. The only way out is to face them, to stand before them. The door behind you suddenly rattled, the sound like someone, or something, was trying to get in. You spun around, your heart hammering in your throat, but the door was still shut tight. The rattling stopped as quickly as it had begun, replaced by an eerie silence. For a moment nothing moved. The fire crackled softly, but it did nothing to dispel the heaviness in the air. Then from outside you heard a low whisper carried on the wind. It was soft at first, barely audible, but then it grew louder, more distinct. Come to us. The voice was like a chorus, layered with others, distant but close at the same time. The sound was coming from all around you, the trees, the very walls of the lodge, vibrating with the pressure of it. Your stomach turned, and the hairs on the back of your neck stood on end. The man rose from his seat slowly, his movements smooth, almost mechanical. "It's time," he said, his voice grim. "They've come for you now." You looked to him, but there was no longer any comfort in his presence. His eyes, those deep, endless eyes, no longer seemed human. They seemed empty. "Go," he urged. "They will not wait much longer." He stepped aside, his arm outstretched, gesturing to the door as though he were inviting you to something inevitable. Your mind raced. Everything inside you screamed to run, to escape, but the door to the outside world no longer seemed like a place of safety. The forest had become something more than a simple stretch of trees. It was alive, and it was waiting. Another whisper curled through the air, and this time, you could almost make out the words clearly. "Come to the trees." You turned, facing the door, your hand resting on the cold metal handle. With each breath, the pressure in the room seemed to mount, and the shadows in the corners of your vision grew longer, thicker, more tangible. You didn't know whether to face what was outside or face what was already in the lodge with you. Then, just as you hesitated, a sudden crash shattered the silence. The door to the lodge rattled violently, as though something had thrown itself against it. The whispers rose into a shriek, tearing at the edges of your sanity. It was time. The door shuddered again, the sound of something heavy slamming against it. The wooden frame creaked under the weight, and the whole lodge seemed to groan in response. Every muscle in your body tensed, a primal instinct urging you to run, to flee from the unknown, but you were rooted to the spot. The whispering outside had become louder, its voices more distinct, more insistent. Come to us." It wasn't just a voice now. It was a chorus of many, layering over each other until it became one haunting, unified command. The walls felt as if they were pressing in on you, and the fire in the hearth burned higher, its light flickering wildly, casting bizarre, exaggerated shadows. The figure by the window, the man, was still standing motionless as though he were no longer human, merely part of the storm. "Don't open the door," he said, his voice nearly drowned out by the rising crescendo of whispers. You stepped backward, your feet slipping slightly on the wet floor, your eyes locked on the handle of the door, which now seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The storm outside had become a physical force, the wind howling so violently it seemed to be rattling the bones of the trees themselves. You could almost feel them, the ancient trees, bending in the wind, straining as if trying to pull the lodge down with them. And then, without warning, the door burst open. A violent gust of wind surged into the room, scattering embers from the hearth across the floor. The whispers, no longer just whispers but shrieks, guttural and torn, swept in, filling the room, seeping into your very skin. The door, now wide open, revealed nothing but the thick, suffocating fog that had engulfed the forest. Beyond it, you could see the dark silhouettes of the trees, their branches like twisted, clawed hands reaching for the sky. But something was wrong. As the door swung open, the shadows around the lodge seemed to shift, stretching and moving in ways that defied the laws of nature. The firelight flickered as if trying to escape the dark, but no matter how hard it tried, the shadows kept encroaching, consuming the edges of the room. The man, who had been so still before, now moved suddenly, his body jerking like a marionette with tangled strings. His head snapped toward you, his eyes wide and unblinking. "They're already here," he said, his voice a ragged rasp. "You've brought them with you." A freezing wind swept through the open door, carrying with it the smell of damp earth, rot, and something far more foul. The shadows outside thickened, as if the very forest was folding in on itself. You could see them now, shapes, indistinct but tall, moving between the trees. They were closing in, their forms too dark, too twisted to be anything of this world. Their limbs bent at unnatural angles, and their heads were too large for their bodies, featureless, save for the deep, empty voids where their eyes should have been. "Shut the door," you shouted, your voice cracking, panic rising in your chest. You took a step forward, but the man reached out, his cold fingers wrapping around your wrist with surprising strength. "You can't shut them out," he whispered urgently. "The door won't stop them. It never has." His grip tightened, his voice low and steady, but there was a hint of something ancient and afraid, deep within his words. Once they've set their sights on you, they will follow you. No matter where you go, no matter what you do. The door slammed shut with a force that rattled the entire lodge, but the shadows outside didn't retreat. They continued to press against the walls, their presence suffocating the air in the room. The temperature dropped, and you could see your breath misting in the sudden chill. The fire in the hearth flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows across the room, but it couldn't hold the darkness at bay. "We can't stay here," you said, your voice barely above a whisper, almost pleading. You tugged at his hand, trying to break free of his grip. "We have to leave now." The man shook his head slowly, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling mixture of sorrow and resignation. "There is no leaving," he murmured. "Not now. You should have listened when I warned you." The wind howled outside, and the air felt heavy, thick with dread. The fire crackled, struggling to survive in the unnatural cold, but there was nothing warm about it anymore. The walls of the lodge seemed to bend and shift as the shadows outside pressed harder, twisting around the structure like hungry tendrils, searching for a way in. "Do you feel them?" the man asked, his voice almost a hiss now, as though his very breath was being stolen by the encroaching darkness. "Do you feel their eyes on you?" Your heart hammered in your chest as you turned, glancing over your shoulder. The walls of the lodge were no longer solid. The wood was warping, the once sturdy beams beginning to bend as if the entire building was being drawn into the forest itself. The shadows outside had grown so thick, so alive, that it was impossible to tell where they ended and the night began. Then, just as you were about to speak, a loud thud echoed from the corner of the room. The sound came from beneath the floorboards, as though something heavy was moving, shifting in the darkness below. You stepped back, fear gripping your throat. The man let go of your wrist, stepping toward the hearth. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was preparing for something inevitable. He reached down to the low wooden shelf beside the fire, pulling something from the shadows. It was a long, carved staff, its surface covered in intricate runes that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie light. "It's time," he muttered. "Time for you to see the truth." You didn't understand. What truth? What could be worse than what you were already witnessing? But before you could ask, the sound from beneath the floor grew louder, a scraping noise, a grinding of something ancient and hungry. The shadows began to twist in on themselves, taking on more form, more substance, as though they were becoming real. Something was emerging, and there was no escape. The scraping from beneath the floor grew louder, more frantic, as though something was clawing its way through the very foundations of the lodge. The shadows outside pressed in closer, their movements synchronizing with the noises from below, the darkness seeming to pulse in time with the vibrations. The air grew heavy with a coldness that seeped into your bones, leaving you numb and paralyzed with fear. The fire flickered weakly, its light waning with every passing second, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the walls. You could feel it now, a presence in the room, something larger than the lodge itself, something older, watching and waiting. You backed away, your feet stumbling over the damp floorboards, your mind racing for any semblance of reason. But there was none to be found here. The lodge, the shadows, the wind, all of it felt like a dream, a nightmare that had turned flesh. The walls seemed to bend and warp, and the very structure of the building groaned, as though it was being pulled towards something far darker than you could comprehend. The man, still clutching the carved staff, stood motionless, his back to you now. He muttered something under his breath, a chant, soft and rhythmic, as if calling upon something beyond the realm of mortal understanding. The runes on the staff glowed brighter with each word he spoke, the symbols shifting, alive with a strange energy. Then, with a sudden crash, the floorboards gave way. A massive, twisting form erupted from beneath the lodge, the splintering wood flying outward in all directions. The room was filled with the sound of creaking timber, the deafening crack of breaking beams, and the shriek of something ancient rising from the depths of the earth. The shadow that had been pressing against the walls surged forward, its form expanding, turning into something vast and unfathomable. At first, it was a shape, a silhouette against the dark floor, but then it grew, long, jagged limbs that stretched unnaturally from the floor, their black, clawed fingers scraping against the walls. The creature had no true form, no clear shape. It was as if the very darkness had taken physical form, twisting and contorting into something monstrous. Its head was a void, an empty space that seemed to devour everything around it. The man didn't flinch. He didn't even turn to face the creature as it slowly rose, its long, crooked limbs lifting it from the floor, its body sprawling outward like a living, writhing shadow. It towered over the room now, filling every inch of space with its presence. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, of something long dead, of rot. "They've come for you," the man said, his voice barely audible over the noise. "And now there is no going back." You could barely process his words, your mind screaming for escape, but your legs felt frozen, as though the very air in the room had turned to lead. You could hear it now, the sound of the creature breathing, a low, guttural sound that reverberated through the floorboards, through your very chest. It was close. It was right there. The whispers too had returned. Louder, more insistent. "Come to us, join us." They cooed, their voices dripping with malice. "You cannot run. You cannot hide." The man's chanting grew more fervent now, his voice rising in pitch, the words becoming more frenzied. The staff in his hands pulsed with a dark, unnatural light, the runes glowing brighter with every syllable. But the creature didn't flinch. It continued to rise, its massive limbs reaching the ceiling now, its form folding over the walls, seeping into the very fabric of the room. It was all around you. The shadows writhed, stretching toward you like tendrils, reaching for your soul. The air grew thick with the scent of something rotten, decayed. You felt the weight of the creature's gaze. Though it had no eyes, you knew it was looking at you. Knew. Wanted you. Suddenly, with a loud, sickening crack, the creature's arm shot forward, its clawed fingers reaching toward you. The room seemed to bend with the movement, warping like rubber stretched too thin. It was faster than anything you had ever experienced, its long, gnarled fingers closing in on you with terrifying speed. A scream tore from your throat as you stumbled back, falling to the ground. Your heart pounded, and for a split second you thought the world might collapse around you. But then something stopped the creature's movement. The man's voice broke through the chaos. "Look at it. Look at what you've brought with you." You forced yourself to turn your head, your eyes meeting the creature's black, shifting mass. There was no face, no eyes, no mouth, only an endless abyss, an emptiness so profound that it seemed to swallow the very light around it. It was the embodiment of darkness, of things lost and forgotten. You could feel its hunger, its cold desire to consume everything in its path. And yet, there was something else in the depths of that darkness. Something worse. It was the feeling of being known, of being seen. As if this creature had been waiting for you, had known you long before you ever stepped foot in the forest. Its very presence was a blight on your soul, an overwhelming weight that crushed all hope. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from every direction, from within the very walls of the lodge. "You've called them here," the man continued, his voice breaking through the madness. "You've given them what they wanted." The creature loomed over you, its clawed hand now so close you could feel the air moving in the wake of its fingers. You could hear the cracking of the wood beneath it, the creaking of the walls, the tension of something about to break. Then, without warning, the creature's hand lashed out. It wasn't fast. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, deliberate, as though it was savoring the moment. The clawed fingers hovered over you, and the whispers in your head grew louder, more frenzied. You felt the coldness, the deep chill of its touch before it even made contact. You closed your eyes, your heart stopping in your chest. This was it. There was no escape. But just before its fingers could touch you, the fire in the hearth erupted. A wave of heat and light surged forward, blasting through the lodge, throwing the creature back with a deafening roar. The creature screeched, the shadows recoiling as the fire burned brighter, the air crackling with an intense energy. The man staggered back, his eyes wide, his body jerking as if the power of the flame had taken hold of him. For a moment, everything was chaos. The fire roaring, the creature thrashing, the shadows twisting in every direction. And then, with a sharp crack, the world went silent. The fire sputtered and died, and the shadows were gone. But you were not alone. The world had gone completely still. The fire that had once roared with such fury was now nothing but smoldering embers, the flames reduced to faint, flickering shadows. The creatures, the shadows, had vanished, their presence replaced by an overwhelming silence that pressed against your ears. The wind outside had stopped. The rain had ceased. Even the trees beyond the lodge seemed to hold their breath, as though the entire forest had paused, waiting for something. Your heart thudded loudly in your chest, every beat a deafening drum against the stillness. The man stood across from you, his hand still gripping the staff, but now his face was a mask of horror. His eyes, once gleaming with ancient knowledge, were wide and filled with fear. The shadows no longer seemed to obey him. Whatever he had hoped to control with his chanting, whatever he had hoped to bind, was slipping through his fingers. But the worst part was the emptiness. The creature, the entity that had emerged from the floor, was gone, but something far darker had taken its place. You could feel it now, creeping into the corners of the lodge, filling the room with a cold, gnawing presence. It was not a physical force. It was something deeper, more insidious. Something that twisted the air around you, something that made every breath feel like a struggle, like you were inhaling something not meant for humans. A sound, low and unsettling, rumbled through the floor, vibrating up your legs and into your chest. It was a growl, but it wasn't like the one you had heard before. This was quieter, more subtle, like the ground beneath you was grumbling, ready to swallow you whole. It was the sound of the earth itself beginning to turn against you. The man looked around frantically, his breath quickening, his gaze darting from corner to corner of the room. "It's not over," he whispered, more to himself than to you. "It's never over." You couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, oppressive, and each inhale felt like you were drawing in the very essence of the forest, heavy with ancient fears. The lodge, once a refuge, had transformed into something alien. The walls had begun to warp again, the timber creaking in protest, bending and stretching as though it too were alive, like it was being molded by invisible hands. The wood groaned, splitting along its seams, and the floor shifted beneath your feet, the boards twisting, cracking with a deep, ominous rumble. "You need to leave," the man said suddenly, his voice sharp, breaking through the fog of terror that clouded your mind. "Get out while you can." You didn't have time to react. The air around you vibrated again, and the man's staff began to glow once more, its runes pulsing with dark energy. He raised it high, and for a moment the shadows in the room seemed to swirl, responding to the staff's call. The glow intensified, and the entire room seemed to bend toward the staff, the walls buckling under its power. "I can't hold it back much longer," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. His body shook, his hands trembling around the staff. "It wants you. You're the one it's been waiting for." The ground beneath you groaned louder, the floorboards buckling under the strain, and the lodge itself seemed to be sinking into the earth. The walls rippled, and the ceiling above you cracked, the sound echoing like thunder as the very structure of the building began to collapse inward. The shadows in the corners of the room surged forward, gathering into a dense mass, twisting and contorting into something alive. And then, through the chaos, you heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not from outside, not from the forest, but from within the walls themselves. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, each step heavier than the last, as though something massive was moving just beyond your sight. It was impossible to pinpoint the source, but you could feel it, closer now, moving through the lodge, circling around you as if the very space itself was closing in. Every instinct screamed for you to run, but your feet felt like lead, your legs unresponsive. The whispers returned, louder than before, their voices mingling with the scraping sound of claws against wood, nails dragging across the beams above. Come closer." The voices cooed, thick with malice. "We've been waiting for you." And then, in the center of the room, the shadows began to coalesce. They seemed to condense, to thicken, like oil floating on water. The shapes, darker than anything natural, shifted, forming into the outline of a massive figure, its form indeterminate, stretching up to the ceiling and beyond, like a black tower of smoke. Its presence was crushing, its size suffocating, and as it took shape, you felt the air grow even colder, the temperature dropping so suddenly that your breath came out in visible puffs. It was close now, so close that you could hear its breath, long, slow, like the sigh of a dying thing. You could feel its gaze upon you, though there were no eyes, no face to define it. It was nothing but darkness, an abyssal force that reached into your very soul, pulling at the fabric of who you were. The man, his voice barely audible over the storm of whispers, chanted again, the words foreign and unintelligible, rising in pitch and desperation. He seemed to be trying to hold the creature back, but it wasn't working. The creature, or whatever it was, continued to grow, its form becoming more solid, more real, and you could feel it pressing in on you, suffocating you like a hand around your throat. The walls of the lodge cracked louder now, the floor beneath you trembling, the foundation of the entire structure shuddering as the creature's presence expanded, taking over everything. You felt your limbs go numb, your fingers frozen to the spot, as the creature's form finally solidified in the center of the room, a swirling mass of pure darkness, its outline shifting and undulating like liquid night. The whispers crescendoed into a scream, a shriek that rattled your bones, that tore through the fabric of reality itself. The creature's form stretched toward you, its shadowed limbs reaching, grasping. And then, the world went black. You awoke to the sensation of weightlessness, as if the very ground beneath you had vanished. There was no floor, no walls, only an endless, swirling void, a blackness so deep that it swallowed any trace of light, of sound. The air was thick and oppressive, the silence deafening. It was as if the world had ceased to exist, leaving you suspended in a place beyond time, beyond reality. There were no shapes here, no forms to grasp, just an eternal expanse of nothingness. You tried to move, but your body felt heavy, like the darkness itself was holding you in place. Every attempt to reach out, to push yourself forward, felt futile, as if the very act of movement drained the strength from your limbs. And then, from the distance, you felt it. A pressure, subtle at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. It was as if the void itself was shifting, bending, warping around you. A weight pressing down, pulling at your very soul, urging you toward something unseen. Something waiting. The sensation was cold, icy, like the chill of the grave itself. You couldn't see it, but you knew it was there, just beyond your reach, just outside your line of sight. The whispers returned, this time more urgent, more insistent. They were everywhere, coming from every direction, but there was no source, no voice to attach them to. They were more than just words. They were a presence, a force that filled the emptiness with their cold, vibrating hum. Come closer, to the edge. The words echoed through the void, vibrating in your chest, tugging at your mind. You tried to close your ears, but it was impossible. The whispers crawled inside, burrowing into your thoughts, wrapping around your mind like a tightening noose. The pressure grew heavier, and the space around you seemed to shift, the blackness distorting and folding in on itself. Your breath quickened, panic rising as you felt the pull. Something was pulling you toward that voice, toward that thing. The whispers grew louder, more desperate, and you realized with a shock that they were no longer speaking to you in words. They were thoughts. Deep, dark thoughts that you could not control, that weren't even yours. They were invading your mind, feeding you visions, feeding you fears. The images came all at once. A forest of trees twisted beyond recognition, their bark rotting, their limbs bending in unnatural angles, their shadows stretching into grotesque, monstrous shapes. A lodge, crumbling and decayed, its walls twisted and warped as if the wood had become alive, festering in the darkness. And there, in the heart of it all, something moving, a shape too large, too vast to comprehend. The thing that had waited for you. The thing that had always waited. Your heart pounded in your chest as the images consumed you, suffocating you. You wanted to look away, to scream, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. No way out. The darkness surrounded you, and the whispers clawed deeper into your mind. And then, as if by some twisted design, the world shifted again. The darkness parted, and before you, through the swirling void, there appeared something solid, something real. A door. The door was made of old, weathered wood, its surface etched with ancient symbols. Symbols you didn't understand, but they resonated with something deep inside you, something primal. It was a door like no other, a threshold between worlds, a passage to places beyond comprehension. You moved toward it, your body moving against the crushing weight of the void. It was as if the darkness itself was reluctant to let you go. Every step felt like a battle, like walking through thick mud, but the pull toward the door was undeniable. You knew deep down that it was your only way forward. The whispers screamed louder, urging you to stop, to turn back, but you ignored them, pushing forward until your hand rested on the cold wood of the door. The moment your fingers made contact, the world seemed to shudder. The whispers cut off, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like the entire universe had held its breath. The door began to creak, slowly, its hinges groaning as though it hadn't been opened in centuries. The very air around you seemed to tremble with anticipation, the dark energy thickening, pooling around the threshold. And then the door swung open. It was not a bright light that greeted you as you might have expected, but something far more unsettling, a dim, sickly glow that cast everything in a harsh, unnatural light. You could see now the landscape beyond the door, a twisted, barren wasteland, a place where the sun never rose and the sky was a sickly yellow. The land was cracked and dry, the ground littered with broken stones and twisted, blackened roots. The trees here, if they could even be called trees, were gaunt and skeletal, their bark peeling away like dead skin. And standing in the distance, in the heart of this bleak landscape, was the thing you had been running from, the creature that had emerged from the floor of the lodge. Its massive form loomed against the horizon, its limbs stretching impossibly long, its body made of shifting shadows, its very essence an affront to nature itself. But now you could see its face, or what should have been its face. A twisted mass of void, a deep, consuming emptiness, and within that emptiness millions of tiny glowing specks, eyes, countless eyes, all focused on you, all watching, waiting. "You're here," a voice echoed, not from the creature, but from the very air itself. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It was the man, the one who had led you into this nightmare. He had followed you through the door, and now he stood beside you, his form flickering like a dying flame. "You've opened the door," he said, his voice cracked and broken. "And now there is no escape." You looked back at the door, at the void behind you, but it was gone. The doorway had disappeared, replaced by the same emptiness that stretched endlessly into the wasteland before you. The whispers returned, louder now, more insistent than ever. "You brought them here. You brought them home." The man staggered forward, his hands clutching at his head as if the pressure of what was beyond the door was too much to bear. "It's too late," he whispered. "You've opened it. You've summoned them." And then, without warning, the ground beneath you trembled, the earth shaking with an intensity that made you stumble. The creature, the thing that had been waiting, began to move, its limbs stretching impossibly far, its body writhing and contorting as it drew closer. The dark, void-like eyes continued to watch, and with each step it took, the very landscape seemed to collapse under its weight, as if the world itself was falling apart. The man turned to you, his face twisted in despair. "Run, run." But there was nowhere to run. The ground trembled beneath your feet, and the air itself seemed to crackle with an unnatural energy. The creature, now fully awake and aware, was drawing closer. Its form shifted and writhed, stretching and growing in impossible ways, its dark limbs sweeping across the barren wasteland like branches in a storm. The sound of its movement was like thunder, each step a resounding boom that echoed in the very core of the world around you. You wanted to run, to flee, but your body felt paralyzed, as though the very atmosphere around you was holding you in place. The man, his face contorted in agony, stumbled backward, his hands pressed to his temples as if trying to shut out the madness that surrounded him. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was no escape for him either. "You've opened the door," he whispered again, his voice trembling with terror. "And now you've called them all. The hungry ones." The words struck you like a blow, their meaning wrapping around you like a cold, suffocating blanket. The hungry ones? What did he mean? What had you done by stepping through the door? But before you could ask, the creature spoke. It wasn't with words, at least not in any language you could comprehend. It was a sensation, a deep, guttural vibration that resonated within your bones, your very soul. The air grew colder, the wind shifting as the creature's presence expanded, enveloping the wasteland. The whispers, which had been growing louder, now combined into a single voice, one that you could feel more than hear. It was a voice that crawled under your skin, filling every corner of your mind. "We are the darkness that was forgotten." The voice boomed, not in any one direction, but in every direction, shaking the very foundation of the world. "We are the hunger that was left behind, the ones who wait in the shadows. And you brought us here." The man fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, his mouth moving in silent prayer, or perhaps some last desperate attempt to protect himself. But it was clear that nothing could stop what was coming. Not now. Not after you had opened that door. You turned, desperately searching for an escape. The door, the one that had brought you here, was gone. There was no way back to the lodge, no path leading out of this desolate wasteland. It felt as though the world itself had been swallowed by the creature's presence, leaving nothing but a void of dust and shadows. The ground shifted beneath you again, and you stumbled, barely catching yourself before falling. The land around you was changing. Cracks began to form in the earth, deep fissures that seemed to stretch on endlessly, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. In the distance, the silhouette of the creature loomed larger, its massive form growing ever closer. It was almost upon you. You glanced back at the man, who was now writhing on the ground, his body convulsing as though he were being pulled into the earth itself. The shadows around him began to twist, coiling around his limbs like serpents, pulling him into the soil. His screams were low and muffled, as though he were being buried alive. "You cannot escape," the voice from the creature continued, its presence closing in on you with every passing second. "The hunger, it calls to you. You cannot outrun it. You are ours now." The man's screams grew louder as his body disappeared into the earth, the shadows swallowing him whole, until there was nothing left but the faintest trace of his presence. And then silence, an unbearable silence. You were alone. But no, you weren't truly alone. You could feel the eyes of the creature, its presence surrounding you, pressing against your very soul. The whispers returned, now clearer, more distinct. They were no longer distant. They were inside your mind, inescapable, suffocating. "You've opened the door," they chanted, the words melding together until they became one. "You've called us here. And now you will pay." With a sudden burst of energy, you took a step forward, your legs moving faster than they ever had before. You didn't know where you were running or why, but you couldn't stand still any longer. Every instinct screamed at you to move, and so you ran. The wasteland stretched out before you, endless and unforgiving. The land shifted with every step you took, cracking and crumbling beneath your feet, the ground unstable, as though it were collapsing in on itself. The creature's presence grew stronger with every passing moment, its hunger palpable in the air. You could feel its eyes, countless eyes, watching you from the shadows, following your every movement. It was as if the very land had come alive, its desolation an extension of the creature's will. And then, in the distance, you saw it. A glimmer, a flicker of light. At first, you thought it was a mirage, a trick of the mind, but as you drew closer, it became clearer. A small light in the distance, flickering like a candle. A beacon of hope in the midst of the suffocating darkness. Without thinking, you pushed yourself harder, your feet pounding against the cracked earth as you made your way toward the light. The whispers in your head grew louder, more frantic, as if they were trying to warn you to pull you back. But you couldn't stop. You wouldn't stop. The light grew brighter as you neared, and soon you could make out its shape. It was a door, an archway, glowing with a faint, golden light. It stood in the middle of the wasteland, completely out of place like something from another world. The door was framed by ancient, weathered stones, the carvings on its surface worn by time but still visible. The whispers stopped. For a moment, everything fell silent again. The creature's presence seemed to recede, the land around you still and frozen, as if it were waiting for something. You reached the door, your hand trembling as you reached for the handle. The whispers returned, but now they were frantic, desperate. "Do not open it," they screamed. "It will lead to worse things." To them. But you knew there was no choice. You had to open it. You had to escape. And so, with trembling hands, you turned the handle. The moment your hand gripped the cold, iron handle, a pulse of energy surged through your body, like electricity coursing through your veins. The air around you seemed to vibrate with a force you could feel in your chest, and for a heartbeat, everything was still. The whispers, those incessant, suffocating voices, had fallen into an eerie silence, as though the very fabric of the world was holding its breath. With a deep, shuddering breath, you turned the handle. The door creaked open slowly, the sound like an ancient hinge resisting centuries of neglect. A sliver of golden light spilled through the gap, spilling across the barren, cracked earth beneath your feet. You could feel the warmth of it, faint and distant, like the first rays of the sun after a long, cold night. But the warmth did not soothe you, it only heightened your sense of dread. As the door swung open fully, a gust of wind rushed past you, cool and refreshing, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and earth. Real earth, not the dry, lifeless soil of the wasteland you had just fled. You could see now, just beyond the threshold, a new world. It was like stepping into another dimension entirely, a place that seemed to pulse with a strange, almost magnetic force. Beyond the door there was a forest. Not just any forest, but a living forest. Trees with towering, gnarled trunks that reached up to the sky, their thick canopies shimmering with golden leaves that danced in the soft breeze. The ground was carpeted with soft moss and fern, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh rain, damp earth, and something else, something rich, dark, and ancient. It was the scent of life, of something untouched by time. But even as you gazed at the beauty of this strange world, you felt the oppressive weight of the creature's gaze pressing against you. It was still there, somewhere, lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. You hesitated. The door, the archway, beckoned you, but something in your gut told you that this was no escape. It wasn't a haven. It was simply another threshold, a step deeper into the unknown. Still, the whispers in your mind grew louder, more insistent, as if they knew the moment you stepped through, there would be no turning back. Run. Don't go through. It will consume you, they urged, their voices now a cacophony, each one vying for your attention, pulling at your thoughts. You've opened the door. You brought them with you. They will find you here. Your hand trembled, the grip on the door handle tightening as the weight of the whispers crushed down on your thoughts. The door behind you groaned, as if the world itself was protesting your departure from the wasteland. The creature, the one who had been following you, was not gone. It was simply waiting for you to take this final step. But the light from the forest, the golden glow that seeped through the doorway, was irresistible. With a final glance back into the wasteland, where the earth had cracked wide and shadows twisted unnaturally around the ruins, you made your choice. You stepped forward. The moment your foot crossed the threshold, the world behind you seemed to collapse, the ground crumbling, the skies darkening, the wind howling with fury. The moment you stepped forward, you could feel something shift, like the very fabric of reality snapping into place, locking you into this new world. The door slammed shut behind you with a deafening bang. The sound echoed through the trees, a sharp, jarring noise that reverberated in your bones. You spun around, but there was nothing. No door, no escape. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, its towering trees pressing in on you, their dark silhouettes looming against the glowing sky. The whispers had stopped, but the feeling of being watched, of being followed, was stronger than ever. The forest was alive. You could feel it in the air, in the way the leaves rustled, in the way the branches moved. There was a pulse, a heartbeat to this place. The trees weren't just trees. They were something more, something ancient and sentient. You took a tentative step forward, your feet sinking softly into the moss-covered ground, the rich scent of the forest filling your lungs. Felt real. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the oppressive weight of fear lifted, and you could breathe freely, as if the air here was somehow different, purer. But the peace was fleeting. The deeper you walked into the forest, the more you felt that familiar sense of unease creeping back. The light that had once seemed warm now felt cold, harsh. The trees around you began to twist and bend in unnatural ways, their trunks gnarled and twisted, their branches stretching toward you like skeletal hands. The golden leaves of the trees flickered like dying embers, their light flickering like a candle in the wind. And then you heard it. A low, guttural growl, coming from deep within the forest. It was the same sound you had heard before, when the creature had first risen from the ground in the wasteland. It was closer now, its tone vibrating through the very air. The sound was alive with hunger, with thirst, and it was heading straight for you. Your breath quickened. Your heart hammered in your chest. You ran. The forest seemed to stretch and warp around you as you sprinted, the trees closing in, their branches snapping and reaching, their roots rising from the ground like serpents. The golden light that had once filled you with hope now seemed distant, flickering like a dying star. It was as if the very forest was alive with malevolent intent. The growl echoed again, louder this time, reverberating in your bones. You could feel the ground shake beneath your feet as whatever it was began to chase you, its massive form crashing through the underbrush, tearing through the trees. It was fast, too fast, and you knew deep down that you couldn't outrun it. You glanced over your shoulder, but the creature was already upon you. The shadows seemed to explode from the trees, a tidal wave of darkness sweeping through the forest, swallowing everything in its path. You felt a cold, clammy sensation creeping over your skin as the darkness closed in, a crushing weight pressing down on you, making it harder to breathe, harder to move. The world around you was collapsing. The forest was folding in on itself, twisting into a nightmare of shifting shapes, contorted faces, and limbs that reached toward you from every direction. And then, as the darkness closed in, you heard the whispers again. You've come too far. And for the first time since you'd entered this world, you realized the truth. You hadn't escaped. You'd only walked deeper into the heart of the darkness. The weight of the darkness pressed down on you, a suffocating force that twisted the very air around you. The forest, once alive with golden light and vibrant energy, had transformed into something else entirely. The trees had turned gnarled and twisted, their branches contorting into grotesque shapes, like claws reaching for the sky. The ground beneath you felt unstable, as though it was shifting, warping with every step you took. You could hear it now, the sound of the creature, its growl reverberating through the air like the roar of a great beast. It was so close, so present, that it felt like a physical force. The shadows around you were alive, moving in and out of the trees, stretching toward you with each passing second. You could feel their presence, crawling under your skin, burrowing into your very thoughts. But it wasn't just the creature that threatened you. It was the forest itself. The whispers, soft at first, were now a constant presence in your mind. They no longer came from a single direction, but from every corner of the world around you. They were everywhere. You couldn't escape them, no matter how fast you ran, no matter how hard you tried to block them out. The words, the hunger, the darkness, the end, they wrapped themselves around you like a straitjacket, pulling tighter with every breath you took. You've come too far. The words echoed in your mind, louder than the growls, louder than the screams of terror that rose in your chest. It was as though the forest itself was alive, watching, judging, knowing what you had done. You could feel the eyes on you, millions of eyes, hidden in the shadows, watching your every move, waiting for you to make a mistake. And then, suddenly, the ground beneath your feet shifted. It wasn't a gentle tremor, not a casual shifting of the earth. It was something violent. The ground cracked open with a deep, bone-rattling sound, splitting apart like a great fissure in the very fabric of reality. You stumbled, barely catching yourself as the earth buckled beneath you, sending rocks and debris scattering in every direction. The trees around you groaned, their trunks twisting and cracking as if they too were caught in the violent upheaval. Something was coming. The air grew colder, the chill creeping into your bones, making your teeth chatter, your muscles seize. You turned, looking for any sign of escape, but all you saw were the trees, tall, twisted, and impossibly dark. The forest was closing in on you, the space between the trees narrowing, the ground rising as though it were pushing you toward something worse. The whispers were louder now, more frantic, as though they were desperate for you to understand something. "It's too late," they crooned, their voices melding together in a chorus of dread. "You cannot outrun what's coming. We'll find you. It will consume you." You ran harder, faster, your feet pounding against the uneven ground, your breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But no matter how fast you ran, the sound of the growls, the whispers, the creature, it was always behind you, closing the distance with every step. It was like a shadow, constantly pursuing, never tiring, never relenting. The air became thick with a strange energy, electric, buzzing with an unnatural charge. You could feel the pressure building, like the calm before a storm, as though something massive and incomprehensible was about to break free from the earth itself. And then you saw it, the creature. It was no longer hidden in the shadows. No longer just a presence, a growl, an unseen force. It was here, fully revealed. It was enormous, a dark silhouette towering over the trees, its form shifting and undulating in a sickening, unnatural way. Its limbs were twisted and long, stretching impossibly far, bending in directions that defied nature. Its body was an ever-changing mass of darkness, like a living shadow, a void that consumed the very light around it. It had no eyes, no face, only an endless expanse of blackness that seemed to absorb everything, sound, light, time itself. The air around it shimmered with a malevolent energy, like the atmosphere itself was collapsing into its presence. And yet there was something worse. In the very center of the creature's dark form, there was a hole. A deep, yawning void, a blackness so absolute that it seemed to swallow all that came near it. And from that hole there was something moving, something alive. The whispers, the growls, the strange, pulsing energy around you, it was all coming from that center, that black abyss that seemed to call out to you, beckoning you toward it. "Come closer," the voice whispered, but this time it wasn't in your mind, it was real. It was the voice of the creature itself, reverberating through the forest, through the very ground beneath your feet. "Come closer and let us show you the truth." Your body froze. You wanted to run. You wanted to scream. But you couldn't. You couldn't move. The force of the creature's presence was like a weight on your chest, holding you in place, keeping you from escaping. You could feel its hunger, its insatiable thirst for something. Something that you didn't understand but knew, deep down, that it was coming for you. The creature's limbs began to move, stretching further, twisting toward you with horrifying speed. The darkness surrounding it expanded, swallowing the forest, consuming the trees, the earth, the very light around you. "You're ours now," the voice whispered, its tone thick with malice. "There is no escape from the hunger, from the end." And as the creature reached out, its limbs closing in on you, the ground beneath you cracked open again, and you were falling into the darkness. The last thing you heard before the abyss swallowed you whole was the sound of a deep, rumbling growl. And then, nothing. The sensation of falling seemed endless, like the very fabric of time had unraveled, leaving you in free fall through an abyss that stretched on forever. The darkness closed in around you, all-consuming, suffocating. There were no sounds except the rush of the wind in your ears, no light to guide you, no sensation of movement. It felt like you were falling through a space that didn't belong to any world, through a tear in reality itself. You were not just falling, you were being pulled, dragged, as if something unseen were reaching down, gripping you with invisible claws. Your body lurched as the air pressure changed, the sensation of falling intensifying with each passing second. Yet the ground never seemed to approach. The darkness clung to you like tar, and the weight of it pressed on your chest, suffocating you with its sheer force. There was no escape, no air to breathe, no ground to touch, just the spiraling, endless fall into the void. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. You felt yourself slam into something solid, something cold and unyielding. The impact knocked the wind out of you, leaving you gasping for breath as the air around you became thick with dust, a choking haze that lingered in the air. You coughed, trying to regain control of your breathing, your chest burning from the pressure of the fall. But the world around you was still, utterly silent, save for the faint echoes of your own breath. Slowly, you managed to push yourself up, your hands trembling as they met the cold ground beneath you. The darkness was still overwhelming, but now it felt different, denser somehow. It wasn't the same void you had fallen through. This place was tangible, almost alive. The ground beneath your palms was rough, uneven like stone, yet warm to the touch, as though it were breathing. The walls around you were smooth, slick, and curved, giving the distinct impression of being inside some great living creature. Your breath quickened. The whispers, which had been a constant in the back of your mind, were now louder, more urgent, more desperate. "You are here now," they hissed, a chorus of voices filled with a strange mix of sorrow and hunger. "You have fallen into the heart of it, the place where time is forgotten, where all things end." You struggled to rise to your feet, your limbs weak and disoriented, but the world around you felt off, tilted, wrong. The air was thick with a heavy, oppressive presence, like you were surrounded by something ancient, something alive. A flickering light appeared in the distance, a weak, fragile glow in the suffocating darkness. You squinted, trying to focus on it, but it seemed to shift, to move, as though it were alive in its own right, pulsing with a rhythm that didn't belong. It was a soft, golden light, faint, almost imperceptible, but it seemed to offer something real in this otherwise barren, lifeless space. Driven by some primal instinct, you moved toward it, your steps faltering but determined. The further you walked, the more the whispers grew louder, as if the darkness itself was reacting to your presence. The air felt colder now, a biting chill that made your skin crawl, and the shadows around you seemed to shift, becoming more dense, more suffocating. "You shouldn't have come," the voices hissed, their tone now sharp and cutting, as if angry at your intrusion. "You've come too far. You've awakened it. And now it's yours to keep." The flickering light in the distance began to take form. It was no longer just a glow, it was a door. A small archway of stone, its surface covered in strange symbols and markings that glowed with the same golden light. The doorway was unlike anything you had ever seen, ancient and alien, yet there was something strangely inviting about it. With a final, desperate push, you reached the archway. The moment your hand touched its cold surface, the whispers stopped. The silence was absolute, suffocating, and for a brief moment, you thought you might be free from their grasp. But that silence was replaced by something far worse. From beyond the door, a low rumble echoed, a sound like distant thunder reverberating through the very walls of the place you now stood. The ground beneath you trembled again, more violently this time, as though the entire world was shifting. And then, from the shadows that seemed to coil around the edges of the doorway, something emerged. At first, it was just a shape, a vague, shifting silhouette. But as it moved closer, details began to emerge. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, its body draped in tattered robes that fluttered in the air like the wings of some great, decaying bird. Its face was obscured by a dark hood, but its presence, its energy, was undeniable. It radiated a cold, ancient power that seemed to warp the air around it. The whispers had returned, but they were no longer a cacophony. Now they were singular, deep and resonant, coming from the figure itself. "You are too far gone," the voice said, a low, gravelly tone that reverberated in your bones. "There is no going back now. No escape from what you've summoned." You staggered backward, your pulse racing. The figure stepped forward, its long, skeletal hand emerging from the folds of its robe, the fingers elongated and gnarled, covered in patches of dark, rotting skin. The touch of its hand was not warm, but cold, like ice that sank deep into your flesh. "The hunger is upon you," it whispered, its voice like a breath of wind on a tombstone. "It has claimed you." The air around you thickened, the pressure building until it felt like the walls were closing in on you. The figure raised its hand, and a shadow, like a living thing, unfurled from its palm. The shadow spread outward, stretching across the ground, across the walls, until the entire space was engulfed in darkness. The golden light from the doorway flickered and died, leaving you in total blackness. You could feel it now, the hunger. It was a gnawing, insatiable force deep within your chest, a pull at your very soul, dragging you toward that darkness. You could feel it seeping into your bones, claiming you, pulling you down deeper and deeper into the abyss. "You are the final piece," the figure whispered, its voice soft, almost pitying. "The final offering. Welcome to the end." And with that, the darkness surged forward, and you were consumed. The sensation of being consumed was not like the simple fading of consciousness or the peaceful oblivion of sleep. No, this was different. This was alive. The darkness itself was aware of you. It wrapped around you like tendrils of cold smoke, slowly constricting, pulling you into a state of paralysis. It moved with purpose, crawling into every corner of your mind, each touch a cold whisper that dug deeper into the very fabric of your thoughts. You tried to scream, to fight it, but there was no sound, no escape. The darkness wasn't just around you now, it was in you, part of you. You felt it crawling through your veins, seeping into your muscles, into your lungs, suffocating you. There was no light here, no warmth. Only a cold that chilled your very soul, a vast, unfeeling emptiness that stretched out in all directions. And then, as the weight of it began to pull you deeper, deeper into the heart of the abyss, something shifted. The whispers, once so frantic and loud, now became softer, more distant, as though they were fading into the background. You could still hear them, but they were no longer the overwhelming force they had once been. Instead, a new sound began to creep in, rising slowly from the depths. A voice. Not the voice of the figure. No, this voice was different. It was a calm, almost soothing voice, the kind that could lull you to sleep. But there was something off about it, something chilling beneath the calm tones. It spoke with an ancient authority, each word dripping with an otherworldly hunger. "You have entered the Evernight," the voice whispered, the words curling around you like smoke, pulling you deeper into its grasp. "This is where all things go when they are lost. This is where you are meant to stay. Forever." A cold chill ran through your spine at the mention of the word Evernight. It was a name you had heard only in the darkest of legends. The place beyond places, the prison for those who had been claimed by the shadows. It was where the hungry ones resided, where the very essence of time and space unraveled into nothingness. You tried to move, tried to push back against the suffocating weight of the darkness, but it was futile. Every inch you tried to move felt like a battle, your limbs heavy, unresponsive, as though you were caught in the grip of something far stronger than yourself. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light, it was alive and it was controlling you, bending your will to its own. "You will stay here," the voice continued, its tone shifting now, becoming more insistent. "You have no place in the world of the living anymore. You are ours, our final piece. The end." With those words, the world around you shifted again, but this time it was not a fall. No, this felt different. It was as if the ground beneath you opened up once more, but instead of falling through a void, you felt yourself descending into something that felt familiar. A place that felt like a memory, a vision from a dream long forgotten. The darkness around you began to pull back, but only slightly, enough for you to see the faintest flicker of light in the distance. A soft, golden glow like the dim embers of a fire. The air smelled of smoke, of burning wood, and something earthy, damp, like the forest after a rain. You tried to focus on it, tried to make sense of it, but the darkness was still there, clawing at your mind, dragging you back toward its cold embrace. And then you saw it. A doorway. It was small, barely more than a slit in the air, but it was there. The golden light flickered around its edges, like a beacon, a point of escape. Your heart raced at the sight of it, but the moment your mind latched onto the idea of escape, something twisted within you. The door was not salvation. It was something else. Something that wanted you to reach for it. The whispers returned, louder now, filling your mind with their maddening chorus. "Do not approach it," they hissed, their voices now a shrill cacophony. "It is not a door. It is a trap, a prison for you, for all of us." But it was too late. The moment you even thought to step toward it, the world shifted again. The darkness withdrew even further, revealing more of the door, more of the golden light that pulsed in time with your heartbeat. It was like a call, a lure, drawing you in with promises of freedom, promises of something beyond the suffocating grip of the Evernight. You didn't think. You couldn't think. The pull was too strong. You reached out. The instant your hand made contact with the edge of the door frame, a shockwave of energy coursed through you, electrifying every nerve in your body. The world around you snapped into sharp focus, too sharp, too intense. The shadows vanished, the pressure in your chest released, and the darkness that had consumed you retreated. You were outside. For a moment there was nothing. No sound. No movement. No time. Just a stillness so profound that it seemed to swallow the very concept of existence. The golden light flickered, casting strange, jagged shadows across a landscape that seemed both alien and familiar. It was a forest, but it wasn't the same forest you had entered earlier. This was a place untouched by time, its trees ancient and massive, their trunks twisted in unnatural shapes. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood, of life long past, yet there was no wind, no rain. The silence in the air was absolute. It was beautiful in a way that made you feel small, trapped in a world that had no place for you. "You are here," the voice from the Evernight whispered again, but this time it was different. It was no longer the voice of hunger or control. This voice was calm, almost welcoming. "This is where you will remain. The place between worlds. The place where all lost things come to rest." The forest before you seemed to stretch on endlessly, its path winding deeper into the unknown. You stood at the threshold of this realm, the doorway behind you now completely gone, sealed off by an unseen force. You realized with a cold wave of understanding that there was no escape. This was your prison, your final resting place. The Evernight was not just a place, it was a state of being, a place that consumed time itself, that swallowed the very essence of what it meant to exist. And here you would remain, forever. Time had become something unrecognizable here. The forest stretched out before you in a sprawling labyrinth of towering trees, their gnarled branches twisting and curling in ways that defied nature. The air was thick with the scent of moss, decay, and the weight of ancient things, yet it was unnervingly still. No wind stirred the leaves, no rustling of creatures, nothing moved. It was as though the very land itself was frozen in time, holding its breath, waiting. You took a hesitant step forward, your feet sinking slightly into the soft, wet earth. Every step felt like a step deeper into a nightmare, but at the same time, the pull of this place was undeniable. It called to you not with sound, but with its sheer presence. The golden light that had flickered from the doorway faded behind you, leaving the forest bathed in an eerie twilight, a glow that didn't come from any known source. It wasn't day. It wasn't night. It was simply a liminal space, a place where the passage of time no longer held meaning. And then you felt it, a presence, a watching. It wasn't like before when the creature in the Evernight had pursued you with hunger. This presence was more subtle, patient, almost expectant. It was as though the forest itself was alive, aware of you, waiting to see what you would do next. You tried to move forward, but every step felt heavier, more uncertain. The whispers too had followed you here. They were softer now, but their message was unchanged. You belong to the Evernight now. There is no escape. You are ours. You could still hear the echoes of the figure's words, the low, gravelly tone that had reverberated in your chest, sealing your fate. There is no going back now. No escape from what you've summoned. But now you weren't sure if the words were meant for you or for something else. Something older, something that had always been a part of this place. Your mind reeled. What was this forest? Was it even real? You had stepped through the doorway, but now, as you looked around, it felt as though you had entered a world outside the boundaries of reality, a place that existed only in the hollow between worlds. You pressed forward, your breath shallow, your senses heightened. The oppressive silence was suffocating, and with each step, you became more aware of the strangeness around you. The trees, though massive, didn't seem natural. Their bark was cracked and weathered, as though they had been here for centuries, yet their limbs reached out like twisting hands, groping in the air, trying to grab hold of something. The very trunks of the trees seemed alive, their surfaces undulating like muscles, as though they were breathing. As you ventured deeper into the forest, the path beneath you became less distinct. The ground, once soft and mossy, was now tangled with roots that rose from the earth like skeletal fingers, threatening to trip you, to ensnare you. The air grew colder still, and the sense of being watched intensified. Every flicker of shadow, every distant rustle of movement made you flinch, your mind racing to make sense of the dissonance between what your senses told you and the overwhelming feeling that you weren't alone. A flicker of movement caught your eye, a shadow darting between the trees. At first, you thought it was your mind playing tricks on you, but then it came again, a fleeting figure barely visible but unmistakable. It moved with a fluidity that seemed unnatural, shifting between the trunks of the trees with the grace of something not quite human. Your heart skipped a beat. "Who's there?" you called out, your voice trembling, but the words were swallowed by the heavy silence. There was no answer, only the soft rustling of leaves, the whisper of branches swaying in the still air. You stepped closer, your pulse quickening, unsure whether you were chasing an illusion or if there was truly someone out there. And then, from behind one of the trees, a figure stepped out. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. She was tall, her figure thin, but her face was obscured by a long flowing veil of dark hair. Her clothing was tattered, hanging loosely from her frame, as though it had been abandoned for ages. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were wide and unblinking, pools of blackness that swallowed the light, empty and hollow. She stood there, motionless, her gaze locked onto yours, unblinking. She didn't speak, but you felt an overwhelming sense of recognition. This woman was not real. She was a shadow, a reflection of something that existed in a place beyond time, beyond the physical world. She was a memory of this place, a being trapped in the forest just as you now were. You took a step back, unsure whether to run or stay. The figure raised her hand, and for a moment, you thought she might reach out to you. But instead, she simply gestured toward the forest, her fingers slender and delicate, pointing toward something beyond the trees, something deeper into the shadows. The forest seemed to respond to her gesture, the trees shifting, their branches creaking as they moved. It was subtle at first, but then the entire landscape began to change. The trunks of the trees twisted more violently, their roots breaking free from the earth, curling and twisting like serpents. The ground itself seemed to warp and bend, the very fabric of the forest rearranging itself before your eyes. The woman's eyes never left yours. "You must follow," she whispered, her voice a low hum that vibrated through the air, as though it were coming from all directions at once. "There is nowhere else to go. The path will reveal itself when you are ready. But be warned, the forest will never give you an easy way out." The words echoed in your mind, reverberating with a sense of finality. There was no turning back now. The woman's presence was a summons, an invitation to go deeper into the Evernight, to descend further into the heart of this place, where time no longer held sway and where the boundaries between reality and nightmare had long since been erased. Without another word, she stepped backward into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. You stood there, breathless, as the forest around you continued to shift, the trees growing more twisted and the air more oppressive. The whispers rose again, but this time they were louder, more insistent, as if the forest itself was urging you forward. "Follow the path," they chanted. "You have no choice." With a final glance over your shoulder, at the place where the woman had stood, you steeled yourself and moved forward. The trees closed in around you, the shadows growing longer, the light dimming, until you could barely see the path ahead. But something inside you told you to keep going, that the forest was testing you, pulling you deeper into its eternal grasp. And so you walked. The whispers led you on. The trees stretched their limbs toward you as if beckoning you into the darkness. There was no light, no warmth, only the cold touch of the Evernight, wrapping itself around you, filling your every step with a quiet, creeping terror. But there was something else too. A pull. A force like gravity, drawing you deeper into the heart of this place. You couldn't explain it, but you felt it in your chest, in the way your heart beat with urgency, with a desperate need to understand, to reach the center of the forest and find what lay waiting there. You didn't know whether it was freedom or doom, but it didn't matter. You had already crossed the threshold. There was no turning back now. The forest seemed to tighten around you with each step, its embrace cold and unyielding. The path, once discernible, had vanished, replaced by an endless labyrinth of gnarled trees, twisting roots, and thick underbrush that scraped against your legs. The air felt heavier here, thick with a stagnant energy that pressed down on your chest, making it harder to breathe. Every inhale felt like inhaling dust, as if the very atmosphere itself was part of the decay that surrounded you. The whispers were louder now, more distinct, and they seemed to pulse with a rhythm, as though they were echoing from all directions at once. "You must go deeper," they urged, the voices overlapping, each one taking on a different tone, a different perspective. "The heart of the Evernight calls to you. It will consume you. You are the offering." Your heart thudded in your chest as the words wrapped themselves around you, tightening with every breath. There was no escape from the pull of the forest, no way to turn back. The path had been swallowed by the darkness, and now you were caught in the web of this place, your every step leading you further into the unknown. The trees stretched higher, their branches twisting together above you, blocking out the sky, turning the world into a suffocating canopy of shadows. And yet, you could still sense the golden glow that had once beckoned you. It wasn't as bright as before, but it was there, faint, flickering like the last embers of a dying fire. You had to reach it. You had to understand what it meant, what it wanted. With each step you took, the forest seemed to shift, the ground beneath you giving way to new forms, new shapes. It was as if the very land was alive, rearranging itself, folding in on itself to create a never-ending maze. The further you went, the less certain you became of your surroundings. Time itself felt distorted here. The air no longer smelled of fresh earth or rain. Instead, it carried the scent of decay, of something ancient and forgotten. There was a sound ahead, low, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. A humming like the buzzing of distant bees, only deeper, more resonant. It was coming from the heart of the forest. You couldn't tell where it was coming from exactly, but it seemed to be pulling you toward it, urging you to move faster, to reach it before it faded away. As you walked deeper, you began to notice that the forest was no longer just a forest. It had become something else, something older. The trees were not just trees. Their bark was covered in strange symbols, intricate carvings that twisted and spiraled up their trunks, as though they were part of some ancient language you couldn't understand. The roots that snaked across the ground had begun to resemble veins, pulsing with an unnatural energy, as though the very earth beneath your feet was alive and aware of your presence. The humming grew louder, more intense. It vibrated through the air, through your bones. You felt it in your chest, in your skull, a deep, resonant pulse that thrummed with power. The whispers rose again, this time urgent, frantic. "It is near," they said. "You have reached it. The heart of the Evernight. The source of the hunger. You will be its next victim." A cold sweat broke out on your skin, and your heart raced in your chest as you pressed on. The air was thick now, suffocating. Your legs felt heavy as though they were wading through mud. The forest seemed to shift around you, its branches leaning in closer, blocking your way, trying to force you off the path. You stumbled, nearly tripping over a large root that seemed to rise from the ground of its own accord, like some great, writhing serpent. Ahead, through the trees, you saw it. A clearing. It was small, surrounded by an unnatural ring of trees that stood taller and darker than any you had seen before. Their trunks were thick, gnarled, and twisted, like the fingers of some massive creature reaching toward the sky. The golden light that had guided you was now brighter, spilling from a central point in the middle of the clearing. It wasn't sunlight, nor was it fire. It was something else, something that defied the very rules of nature. You stepped forward, your feet now moving faster, as if pulled by an invisible force. The air grew colder, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the very ground beneath you. The trees seemed to lean closer, the shadows stretching longer, reaching toward you with unnatural speed. You could feel the darkness closing in, but the light in the clearing was undeniable. Called to you. You entered the clearing, and the moment you did, everything shifted. The ground beneath you cracked open, sending a jolt of shock through your body. The clearing was no longer just a patch of earth. It was a chasm, a vast, gaping wound in the landscape stretching deep into the earth. The golden light flickered and pulsed, coming from the depths below, but it was no longer comforting. It was cold as the grave, like the last flicker of life before it was extinguished. At the center of the chasm was an altar. It was made of dark stone, ancient and covered in strange symbols. Atop the altar lay a figure. You couldn't make it out at first. It was shrouded in a thick cloak of shadow. But as you drew closer, you could see its shape more clearly. It was human, or at least it had once been. The figure's skin was ashen, its body twisted in unnatural angles, and its face was hidden behind a veil of darkness, a face you could not see, could not know. It was empty. The hum was deafening now, a roar that filled your head, making it hard to think, hard to focus. The whispers were gone, replaced by the voice of the creature, the one who had been following you from the beginning. "You have arrived," it said, its voice a deep, guttural rumble that echoed in your very bones. "You have come to claim what is yours." The figure on the altar stirred, and you felt something in the air shift. Something that had been dormant for ages, something ancient and powerful, awakening at your presence. The figure slowly raised its head, revealing a pair of hollow black eyes that seemed to burn with a cold, malevolent energy. The darkness around it began to twist and writhe, pulling itself together, forming a shape, a shadowy mass that loomed above you like a great storm cloud. "You belong to the Evernight now," the creature whispered. "There is no turning back. You have become one of us." A surge of energy coursed through the ground, and the chasm beneath you cracked wider, revealing the depths below, an endless void of darkness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. And then the world went black. You awoke with a sudden, jarring sensation. Your chest heaved with ragged breaths, and your eyes snapped open to nothingness. There was no light, no sound, no sensation of the ground beneath you or the air around you. It was as if the very concept of space had been erased. For a moment, you thought you might still be in the clearing, staring into the dark chasm where the figure had risen. But this was different. You could feel nothing but a deep, aching cold, a cold that gnawed at your very core, a hollow emptiness that spread outward from the center of your being. You tried to move, but it was like swimming through molasses, each limb heavy, unresponsive, as though your body no longer belonged to you. Your mind spun with confusion. Was this the end? Was this the Evernight finally claiming you, pulling you into the void of its eternal grasp? You reached out, but your hand met nothing. Nothing at all. Just endless, oppressive blackness. Your heart began to race, panic rising as you struggled to grasp at the air, to find something solid, something real. But there was nothing. You were surrounded by the deepest void, a place where the very fabric of existence seemed to have torn apart. And yet, in the distance, barely perceptible, there was a sound. A faint hum like the echo of something alive, something waiting. It wasn't the deep, guttural hum from before. This was different. This sound was softer, faint yet unmistakable. The faintest vibration in the very air around you. It called to you, pulling at your mind, urging you to follow. You didn't know how, but you moved. It wasn't a conscious decision. More of an instinct, a compulsion that drove you forward despite the weight of the air, despite the endless nothingness. Each step, though sluggish, seemed to take you further into this inky abyss, where the very nature of time had been erased, where nothing could exist without first being consumed. The hum grew louder, more distinct. It was no longer just a vibration, it was a pulse, a rhythm. You could feel it in your chest, like the beat of a heart, an ancient heart that had been silent for eons. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence, a feeling, a power, something far greater than any physical world. And then you saw it. A flicker of light, dim and fragile at first, like the last spark of a dying flame. It cut through the darkness, casting jagged, trembling shadows against the void. The light pulsed irregularly at first, then steadied, becoming more defined. The shape, a doorway. But it was unlike any door you had seen before. Its edges shimmered and distorted, as if made of the very fabric of reality itself, stretching, warping in ways that defied logic. Its surface was cracked, and through the cracks you could see movement, a shifting of shapes, a glimpse of a place that felt at once both familiar and foreign. The hum was now a deep, resonating tone, like the vibration of a great bell ringing out across an infinite expanse. The light grew stronger, brighter, beckoning you toward it, pulling you with an irresistible force. The whispers, too, had returned, not as the frantic, desperate voices of the forest, but as something else entirely, something deeper. A voice, calm and deliberate, speaking to you in words you could almost understand. "Come closer," it whispered, its voice a low, calming rumble that vibrated through your bones. "It is time. The heart of the Evernight is ready to receive you." You didn't hesitate this time. You couldn't. Every fiber of your being screamed toward that light, that doorway, as if it held the answer to everything that had happened. The forest, the hunger, the chasm. Your soul ached to know what lay on the other side, even as dread gnawed at the edges of your thoughts. What would you find there? What had the Evernight truly claimed from you? With a final step, you crossed into the doorway. The moment you passed through the threshold, the world around you shattered. The void itself seemed to split apart, and you were engulfed by a burst of light, so blinding, so overwhelming that for a moment, you lost all sense of yourself. It wasn't painful, but it was disorienting, as if the very concept of time and space had been unraveled, leaving you suspended in an in-between world where nothing was solid, nothing could be trusted. But then the light began to fade. You were no longer in the void, no longer in the chasm. Instead, you stood at the edge of a great, vast ocean. The water stretched out in all directions, its surface dark and unbroken. There were no waves here, no winds to disturb the surface. It was perfectly still, perfectly silent, as though the ocean itself was holding its breath. The sky above was a swirling mass of dark clouds, pregnant with the weight of a storm that never came. It was a sky that seemed endless, an infinite expanse of swirling black and purple, as if the heavens themselves had been consumed by the Evernight. And then you saw it. At the center of the ocean, standing on a jagged outcrop of stone, was a figure. The figure was tall, almost impossibly so, with a long cloak that billowed around them like a dark shadow. The hood was pulled up, obscuring their face, but you could sense their presence. Powerful, ancient, and heavy with the weight of centuries. They stood motionless, watching you with an intensity that made your skin crawl. You tried to move, but your legs wouldn't obey you. You were paralyzed, trapped in place, as though the very ocean beneath your feet had rooted you to the earth. The figure's gaze turned toward you, and despite the distance, it felt as though their eyes were fixed directly on yours. "Welcome," the figure's voice boomed, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to reverberate through the very air around you. It was the same voice you had heard before, calm, powerful, and endless. "You have crossed into the heart of the Evernight. This is the place where all things return. All lost things. All lost souls." The air grew colder, and the ocean around you seemed to pulse with life, like the slow, rhythmic beating of a heart. The figure raised one hand, and the water began to swirl, forming a vortex in the center of the ocean. The blackness of the water seemed to deepen, pulling you toward it, pulling at your very soul. "You have come far," the figure continued, "but you must understand, there is no escaping this place. There is no redemption, no turning back. You are a part of the Evernight now." The water surged upward, crashing against the rocks, and the figure stepped forward, their presence becoming overwhelming. "You are part of the hunger," they whispered, their voice a soft, terrible caress. "And you will stay here as all others have. Forever." The ocean roiled, the waves rising higher, but the figure remained motionless. You could feel the weight of the water pressing against you, feel the cold reach deeper into your bones. And then you understood. This was the final step, the point of no return. The Evernight was not just a place, it was a state of being, an eternal cycle. Those who entered its grasp were never meant to leave. You had crossed into a realm beyond the known world, a place where the hunger never ceased, where the soul was consumed, and where the dark forces of the universe met. The figure began to fade, their cloak blending with the shadows of the ocean, and in their place the water rose higher, threatening to swallow you whole. There was no escape, only the darkness, only the void, and you were part of it now. The vast ocean, now a chaotic tempest around you, seemed to stretch beyond comprehension. Waves churned with dark energy, crashing against the jagged stone beneath your feet, their force enough to shake your very core. The sky, a swirling mass of black and violet clouds, crackled with distant thunder, yet there was no storm, only the heavy, pulsing hum of something older than time itself. It was as though the world around you was holding its breath, waiting for something to break, to finally release its hold on you. But you couldn't escape. You knew that now. The figure, the one that had greeted you with such a chilling presence, was gone, faded like a shadow into the dark ocean. And with its disappearance, something else had taken its place. A feeling, a sensation, an unrelenting, gnawing hunger that filled every corner of your mind. You stood on the stone outcrop, unmoving as the waters below began to calm, their violent crashing softening into a low, almost hypnotic rhythm. But the hunger, it never stopped. It surged within you, curling in your chest, sinking deep into your soul. You felt it clawing, scraping, pulling at the deepest parts of you. It wasn't just a physical hunger. No, this was something far more sinister. It was a hunger for everything. For time. For memories. For life itself. It was the hunger that had devoured all who had come before you, and now, it was yours to carry. Your soul was bound to it, tied to this place, this heart of the Evernight, and it would never let go. The ocean before you seemed to pulse in time with your heartbeat, its depths shifting, bending, as though it were aware of your every thought. The water, once calm, now began to shimmer and writhe with a strange, oily glow, twisting into shapes that weren't quite water, but something else entirely. Figures, dark, amorphous shapes, rose from the depths, their forms flickering like flames caught in the wind. Their features were distorted, faces half-formed, eyes black as the void, but their mouths were wide, gaping maws filled with teeth that seemed to stretch on forever. They were watching you. You stumbled back, your heart hammering in your chest, but the stone beneath your feet refused to move. You were trapped. You could feel the hunger growing within you, the overwhelming weight of it crushing your chest as if the very ocean was feeding off your fear. The figures in the water moved closer, their presence a suffocating wave that made it hard to breathe. "Join us," a voice crooned from the depths. It wasn't one voice, it was a chorus, many voices melding together, indistinguishable from each other, all dripping with malice and hunger. "Come, embrace the hunger." The water around you rippled as if alive, the figures rising higher. Their glowing eyes burned into you, drawing you closer, coaxing you to step forward. Every instinct screamed at you to run, to escape, but the hunger, the gnawing, endless hunger, was too great. You couldn't move. You could only watch as the shadows in the water took form, twisting and writhing like great serpents, their jaws snapping, mouths widening to consume the very air around you. A single figure, taller than the rest, rose from the water, its form more defined now, but still shrouded in the same flickering darkness. Its face, if it could be called a face, was nothing but a blank void. No eyes, no features, just an endless blackness that seemed to suck in the light around it. "You are one of us now," the voice echoed again, now coming from this towering figure. "The hunger is yours to bear. The endless cycle of consuming, of feeding. The Evernight has claimed you." It reached out with long, skeletal hands, its fingers curling around the air, its grasp extending toward you. As it did, the hunger inside you surged. You felt it clawing at your mind, ripping through every part of you, filling you with a desperate, insatiable desire to feed. You wanted to devour everything, everything and everyone. You wanted to consume until there was nothing left but emptiness. But you couldn't. You didn't know how. "It will consume you first," the figure whispered, its voice a low, guttural rasp that vibrated through your body. "And then you will feed. You will become the hunger." Your chest tightened, the weight of its words pressing down on you like a physical force. The hunger was no longer just a sensation. It was a presence within you, something that had taken root in the deepest part of your soul, something that was you now. You were no longer just an observer. You were part of the hunger. You were part of the Evernight. The realization hit you like a physical blow. Your pulse quickened, a deep dread spreading from your chest outward, suffocating you. This place, this realm, had devoured all who had come before you. And now it had claimed you. There was no escape from its grasp. No salvation. You were a part of it, a piece of the infinite cycle that had been in motion long before your arrival and would continue long after your soul was lost. The figure in the water extended its hand further, its fingers brushing against the surface of the ocean, and the water began to swirl. Slowly at first, but then faster, the water churning violently, spiraling into a whirlpool that seemed to reach up toward the heavens. The shadows, the figures in the water, began to join together, their forms merging, creating a massive, pulsing mass of darkness that radiated with an energy so intense it made your skin crawl. And then, from within the center of the whirlpool, you saw it. A light, a faint, golden glow, shining through the darkness like a beacon. It wasn't just any light. It was the same light you had seen in the heart of the Evernight, the light that had beckoned you forward, promising answers. But now it wasn't just an invitation. It was a destination, a finality. The light pulsed once, twice, and then it was gone. In its place, the hunger grew. The whirlpool collapsed inward, a massive, black vortex that spiraled toward the very core of the ocean. The figures in the water screamed, not in pain, but in a maddening joy, as if they were celebrating your arrival. You were no longer standing on the stone outcrop. You were being pulled into the black water, into the maw of the endless whirlpool. The force of the pull was too great. The hunger inside you had taken on a life of its own, a force you couldn't control. You felt your body being drawn forward, the water closing around you, your lungs burning for air, but the need to feed, to devour, was all that mattered now. "Come to us," the voice from the depths whispered again, the chorus of voices merging into one final, terrible cry. "Join the hunger." And then everything went dark. The darkness that enveloped you was not merely an absence of light, but a complete erasure of everything you had known. It was a silence so profound that it crushed all thought, all memory, all sense of time. You could no longer feel the water, no longer sense the hunger that had been clawing at you only moments before. Everything, every sensation, every existence, had been drawn into the blackness. And yet there was something, someone, whispering. A voice, a presence. It wasn't the voice from before, the one that had called you into the Evernight with promises of eternal hunger. This was different. It was calmer, softer, but somehow no less oppressive. The voice seemed to come from all directions at once, swirling in your mind like smoke, invading your thoughts, pressing them down. "You are lost," it murmured. "Do you feel it? The emptiness? The space that remains when you are nothing." The words stirred something within you, a flutter of recognition, a faint memory of who you had been before the Evernight claimed you. It was a sensation you had almost forgotten, a thread of something that was you, something that still existed beneath the consuming darkness. "You are not yet broken," the voice continued, its tone gentle now, as though speaking to a fragile thing. "But you are close, so very close. The hunger still calls, still echoes in your soul, and the Evernight has not released you. You are its child now, but you have not yet joined it." The words spun in your mind, too many thoughts, too many conflicting ideas, battling against the emptiness. The voice was right, you thought. Something was missing, something that had once defined you, a sense of self, a sense of being that was no longer there. You had crossed a line. The hunger had claimed your soul, and with it, your identity had slipped away, thread by thread, consumed by the darkness. But now there was a whisper, a pull, something not the hunger, something that felt foreign, something that resisted. "Do you remember?" the voice asked, the whisper laced with something almost like sorrow. "Do you remember who you were before the Evernight? The living world." It was a question that gnawed at the edges of your consciousness, pulling at the very fabric of your mind. The living world. Before. It felt like a distant dream now, familiar but unreachable, like the remnants of a life you had once known but had long since forgotten. You tried to reach for it, but the effort felt futile. The more you tried to grasp it, the more it slipped through your fingers like water through cracks. The Evernight, the hunger, the forest, they had eroded you, taken everything that made you, and left only the endless void in its place. "But you still have the spark," the voice whispered again, softer now, coaxing. "That part of you that resists, the part that fights. It is not gone yet. It may never be gone. But you must choose now. Choose." The word hit you like a shockwave, reverberating through the vast emptiness. The choice was yours. You had been consumed by the Evernight, but you had not become it. Not fully. Not yet. There was still something in you that resisted, still something that clung to the dying remnants of who you were. You didn't understand. What was the choice? What was left for you to choose? How could you choose anything when everything you had been devoured? But then another pulse, another whisper, echoed in your mind, this time a clearer image, a glimpse of something, a place, a forest, the forest. You were no longer in the ocean, no longer standing at the edge of the chasm. You were back in the place where it had all begun. The dark forest, its towering trees stretching high above you, their gnarled branches forming twisted shapes that seemed to mock the very idea of nature. The rain was falling again, soft at first, then heavier, the patter of the droplets on the ground like 1,000 tiny hammers. The fire you had seen before, its crackling warmth, was no longer just a memory. It was real, blazing brightly in the distance, the orange and red flames licking the air, sending plumes of smoke into the dark sky. The fire, the warmth, called to you. For a moment you hesitated. The darkness in your mind pulled at you, reminding you of the hunger that still gnawed at the edges of your soul. But the fire, it was different. The flames were a stark contrast to the void that had consumed you. They were a flicker of life in a world that had stripped you of it. You felt something inside you stir, a desperate urge to move toward it. You took a step, then another, each movement more sure, more deliberate as the fire drew closer. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, and as you approached the campfire, you saw figures, shadows, standing around it. You couldn't make out their faces, but they were human shapes, their outlines blurred by the dancing flames. There was something about them, something familiar. But as much as you tried to reach for the memory, it was just out of reach. You are not alone, the voice from the darkness whispered again, its tone far away now. They are here. They have always been here. They are your choice. The figures around the fire shifted, and as they did, the darkness seemed to ripple around them, bending and warping like smoke caught in the wind. You could feel it, the evernight, the hunger pushing against the walls of your mind, urging you to turn away, to retreat into the safety of oblivion. But you couldn't. You had to face it. You had to choose. The figures stepped aside, revealing a path that led through the forest, toward something beyond the fire. It was an archway, tall, dark, and covered in vines. Its shape seemed impossibly intricate, a doorway into something you couldn't quite understand. The fire behind you flickered one last time, its light casting long, haunting shadows across the clearing. The whispers of the evernight still echoed in your mind, but they were quieter now, fading into the background. The choice was yours. The figure in the shadows, the one you had seen before, the one that had haunted you through the evernight, stepped forward once more. The face, it was still obscured by darkness, but its presence was heavy, like a weight pressing down on you. Will you remain here, the voice rumbled, and become one with us? Or will you walk away, into the unknown, into the light? You stood there, heart pounding in your chest, torn between the two options. There was no time to think, no more moments to waste. The fire, the warmth, the archway, the darkness, they all swirled around you, offering two paths, two destinies. But which one would you choose? The air hung thick with tension as the voice of the shadowed figure echoed around you. The flames from the fire flickered, casting long, twisted shadows that danced on the edges of your vision. Everything seemed to slow, as if time itself had hesitated, waiting for your decision. You stood at the crossroads of something ancient, something far beyond the simple passage of time, beyond the choices you thought you could make. The figure before you, the one that had been watching you from the depths of the evernight, now waited with an eerie stillness, its presence a cold weight upon your heart. The fire behind you continued to burn brightly, its warmth pushing against the gnawing cold of the darkness that surrounded you. The flames crackled, popping as they reached higher, yet the fire never seemed to die. It was a symbol of life, of the world you had once known, a faint reminder of something real. The smell of burning wood, the warmth it promised, it was enough to make you feel, if only for a fleeting moment, that there was hope. But hope, it seemed, was fleeting in this place. You glanced at the archway again, the dark passageway that seemed to lead to something else, something other, an unknown future that was as enticing as it was terrifying. The vines twisted around the frame like serpents, their tendrils curling as if alive. It wasn't just a doorway, it was a gateway to whatever lay beyond. It called to you with the same unsettling energy that had drawn you to the evernight in the first place. But then there was the fire. The fire, so full of life, so full of warmth and promise. Could you really leave it behind? Could you abandon the chance to escape this dark place, this twisted world, in favor of an unknown that might only bring more darkness, more hunger? Your mind reeled, torn between the two options. The figure stepped closer, its presence growing heavier, a force that seemed to stretch into every corner of your mind. It spoke again, its voice like the rumble of distant thunder, full of ancient authority. You are standing at the threshold, it said, its words like iron, cold and unyielding. The fire calls to you. The warmth, the life you once knew. But remember this, wanderer, once you walk through that archway there is no going back. No more fire, no more warmth. Just the endless march of the Evernight, the eternal darkness that will consume you and all that you hold dear. A shiver ran through you, but the figure was not finished. But perhaps that is what you want, it mused, its voice shifting, almost thoughtful. Perhaps you are ready to join us, to become part of the hunger, part of the infinite void, to shed what you were and become something more, something greater. The fire will burn out in time, and when it does, there will be nothing left but the darkness. It was true. The fire, for all its warmth and promise, was an illusion, a fleeting spark in the grand scheme of the Evernight. Nothing could escape the pull of the void. No warmth could last forever. The fire would die, and when it did, the hunger would rise and it would consume everything. The archway, however, was different. It was unknown. A step into something beyond the hunger, beyond the pull of the endless cycle. What lay on the other side? Was it a new beginning, or would it only lead you deeper into the web of shadows? Could it be a way to escape this twisted place, or would it only serve to trap you further? The decision felt impossible. But then, something else stirred inside you. A faint memory, a distant echo of what you once were. There was a flicker of clarity in your mind, a whisper that cut through the fog of hunger and despair. You had not come this far to be consumed. You had not crossed the thresholds of the Evernight to simply become part of it. You were still you. The hunger was there, yes, gnawing, relentless, twisting through every part of you, but it had not won yet. Not fully. It had not consumed your soul, not yet. The fire was warm, but it was not an escape. It was an illusion, a fleeting glimpse of something you had lost, something you would never reclaim. But the archway represented something else. It was not a promise of comfort or peace, but it was a chance to escape the endless cycle of hunger. It was a choice. For the first time, you made a decision. You turned toward the archway, stepping away from the fire, away from the warmth that had called to you so strongly. The voice from the darkness shifted, a sound that could have been laughter or sorrow, but it was there, unmistakable, hanging in the air as you took your first step toward the unknown. So it is, the figure said, its tone oddly approving. You choose to embrace the unknown, to walk into the darkness rather than cling to the fleeting comforts of light. Perhaps you will find something there that none of us could. Perhaps. It trailed off as if the figure knew something you did not, as if it understood that this path was fraught with peril. But there was no turning back now. You had made your choice. Your heart beat louder in your chest as you stepped forward, moving toward the archway. The ground beneath your feet seemed to tremble as you crossed the threshold. The moment your foot passed into the shadow of the archway, the world shifted around you. The warmth of the fire, fading. The oppressive silence of the forest, dissolving. The hunger, the gnawing, relentless hunger, began to subside just for a moment, as if the archway held the power to quiet the chaos within you. But the path ahead was not easy. The darkness beyond the archway stretched out before you, vast and endless, but it was different from the Evernight. This place was not yet consumed. It was not yet part of the endless void. It was alive. As you stepped further, the air around you grew colder, but it wasn't the suffocating cold of the Evernight. It was the cold of something ancient, something forgotten. The trees around you were unlike the ones from before, taller, darker, their bark shimmering with an iridescent glow that pulsed in rhythm with your heartbeat. The ground was firm, solid beneath your feet, and the path ahead stretched into a dense fog, a mist that seemed to whisper of secrets long buried. The Evernight, it seemed, had not yet claimed this place. The hunger was not as strong here. Its presence was distant, like a shadow cast over a far-off land. But the silence of this place was just as deep, just as unsettling. There was no warmth here, no fire to hold onto, only the uncertain path ahead. Yet you felt something else, hope. A strange, fragile thing, but it was there. Perhaps this place was not meant to consume you. Perhaps it was a new beginning. You moved forward, each step feeling lighter than the last, until you reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood something. A monument, a stone figure that resembled neither human nor creature, but something in between. The stone shimmered, just like the trees, and as you approached, you could feel it resonate in your chest, a deep, calming hum. The figure's eyes, though carved from stone, seemed to glow faintly with an otherworldly light. It did not speak, but the air around it seemed to whisper, not with hunger, but with knowledge. You had crossed into a place of forgotten power, a realm that stood on the edge of the Evernight, but was not consumed by it. And here, at this threshold, you would face your true test. Would you stand in the darkness forever, a prisoner of the void? Or would you uncover the truth of this forgotten place, and with it, perhaps the key to breaking the cycle? The clearing before you was bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow, the stone monument in the center standing as a silent sentinel to time itself. The air was still, yet it hummed with an energy that sent ripples through the very fabric of your being. It was as though the ground beneath your feet was alive, pulsating in rhythm with the faint hum of the monument, resonating deep within your bones. The trees surrounding the clearing, their bark shimmering with that strange iridescent glow, seemed to lean in closer, their twisted branches reaching overhead like protective guardians. The monument itself was unlike anything you had seen before. Its design was intricate, almost impossibly so, with delicate carvings of symbols and runes that spiraled up the stone in a pattern too complex for your mind to fully comprehend. It was neither ancient nor modern, neither familiar nor alien. It was timeless, as if it had existed before the beginning and would continue to stand long after everything else had faded into nothingness. At its base, deep grooves were worn into the stone as though someone, had touched it countless times, each one leaving a trace of their presence behind. But it was the eyes, those glowing, faintly shimmering eyes, that drew you in. They were not eyes in the traditional sense. There were no pupils, no irises. Just empty sockets, but within them, a soft, flickering light. The light was not constant, but pulsed, fading in and out like the heartbeat of some ancient creature. It was a light you could not look away from, a pull that seemed to draw you deeper into its depths, as if those eyes could see inside you, see you. You felt the pull at once, the sensation of being both small and exposed in the face of something far larger than yourself. Something older. Your mind raced with questions, but none seemed to have an answer. How had you arrived here? What was this place? And what was the monument, the figure, before you? Was it a god? A forgotten force? Or something else entirely? You took a cautious step forward. The ground beneath your feet felt different here, not the damp earth or rough stone of the evernight. This was solid, ancient, but alive with energy. The moment your foot touched the ground near the monument, the hum grew louder, vibrating through your entire body. The energy surrounding it seemed to open up, like a door swinging wide to welcome you, pulling you closer still. A deep, rumbling voice, more of a presence than a sound, echoed in your mind. It wasn't the figure from before, the one that had whispered from the ocean. No, this was something else. Something more ancient. You have chosen, it said, the voice reverberating through your chest as if it were the very breath of the earth itself. You have crossed into the place between worlds, the forgotten realm that exists on the edge of all things. The Evernight has claimed you, yet you have not yielded. You have chosen to seek something more than the hunger. Do you know what you seek? The voice was not one that demanded an answer, but it seemed to expect one nonetheless. You stood there, trying to gather your thoughts, but it felt as though the very air around you was making it hard to think clearly. The monument before you pulsed with energy, as if alive with a consciousness that was both distant and intimate at once. The figures etched into the stone were not just carvings, they were memories, stories, telling of an ancient past, long forgotten by the world that had once known it. You seek an answer, the voice continued, a knowing tone now in its words. You seek to understand the Evernight, the hunger that has consumed you. You seek to know why you were brought here, why the fire called to you, why the shadows have followed you. But answers come at a cost. The words hung in the air like smoke, each one curling and twisting, filling your mind with a sense of unease. The hunger, the thing that had followed you from the forest, that had whispered in your mind, pulling at the edges of your soul, it was not gone. It still throbbed within you, a constant reminder of what you had been through. But now, in the presence of the monument, in the face of this strange power, you felt it shifting. You cannot escape it, the voice continued, its tone growing softer now, almost sympathetic. The Evernight is a cycle, a hunger that devours all. But here, at the edge of this world, at the threshold of truth, you can choose to face it or fall into it completely. If you seek the truth, you must give something of yourself. Everything has a price. You felt it then, the choice that loomed over you like a mountain. The Evernight, the hunger, it had been part of you, part of your very soul, since the moment you had crossed the threshold of this place. But now you had been given a chance to understand, to break the cycle, to stand at the edge of the darkness and look beyond it. But there was a price. You could feel it now, the weight of the choice pulling at your chest, sinking deep into your core. The hunger inside you, the very thing that had driven you to this place, was not just a force of nature. Was you. It was your fear, your pain, your desire for something greater, something beyond the endless emptiness of the Evernight. You had become a part of it. And now, to find the truth, you would have to give something up. The monument before you pulsed again, its eyes flickering as if in response to your thoughts. The light within them seemed to dim, then flare brighter, as if awaiting your decision. What will you give? The voice asked softly, the question resonating in your mind. Will you surrender your soul to the hunger and become one with the void? Or will you stand against it and offer up your fear, your identity, your very essence? There was no escaping the weight of the decision. You could feel it deep in your bones, the truth of what had brought you here, what the Evernight had wanted all along, what you had wanted. But could you face it? Could you offer up that part of yourself to gain the answers you sought? Or would the hunger claim you completely, leaving nothing behind but an empty shell? You had already crossed the line. But now you stood at the precipice of something far more terrifying. The hunger had taken so much from you already, but there was still something left. Something precious. The voice was waiting for your answer. The words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating and oppressive. The monument before you seemed to pulse, its carved eyes glowing faintly in the shadowed clearing, as if it were alive, watching you, waiting for you to make your choice. The air around you shimmered, the ancient hum of power growing louder in your ears, vibrating deep within your chest. It was the sound of something vast, something old, awakening. You stood at the edge of this forgotten realm, torn between the hunger that had consumed your soul for so long and the strange pull of the monument that offered an escape, a revelation. The price, however, was steep. The hunger was not just something that haunted you, it was part of you. You had become it. Every whisper in your mind, every shadow that loomed over you, it was a reflection of your own fears, your own desires, your own brokenness. To stand against it would be to sever a part of yourself that had grown so deeply entwined with who you were, it felt impossible. How could you separate the hunger from your very soul? How could you give up what had become your essence? The idea of walking away from it, of leaving that hunger behind, was terrifying in its own right. And yet, the monument before you was more than just stone. It was knowledge, ancient and powerful, waiting to be unlocked. The voice, deep, rumbling, ancient, echoed through your mind once again, pressing down on your chest like an unyielding weight. To understand the truth, it whispered, to break the cycle of the Evernight, you must offer a part of yourself. The hunger, the darkness, it has always been yours to bear. But it is not the only part of you. There is something else, something that has been buried beneath the weight of fear and desire. Will you find it? You felt the pull, that subtle whisper in your soul, urging you to search within, to look beyond the hunger and the darkness. There was something hidden there, something other, a part of you that had been buried by the very force you had been consumed by. The hunger had swallowed your identity, your memories, but could it have swallowed everything? Could there still be something left? You closed your eyes, trying to focus, to reach past the gnawing hunger, the fear that had become your constant companion. It was difficult, like pushing through thick mud, but you felt it, a flicker, a spark deep within your chest. A faint pulse that had not been extinguished by the hunger. It was the faintest echo of something else. Something that had been you before the Evernight, before the hunger. You breathed in, drawing on that faint memory, that fragile piece of yourself. It was a feeling, a sensation of light, warmth, and hope. It was like remembering the touch of a long-lost hand, the feeling of sunlight on your skin, the soft laughter of someone you had once known. It was distant, but it was real. It was the part of you that had resisted, that had fought to remain even in the face of darkness. This was the offering. You see it now, the voice murmured, the tone filled with a strange mix of approval and sorrow. That part of you that you thought lost, buried in the shadows. It is not gone, not truly. It has been hidden beneath the weight of the hunger. And now you must decide. The monument's eyes flared brightly, the pulse of energy growing stronger as the ground beneath you trembled. You could feel the energy building, rising like a tide, ready to consume you. The hunger was still there, clawing at the edges of your mind, pulling at your very essence, but now there was something else, something stronger. This was your moment. The price was high, but the truth lay within your grasp. Would you offer this fragment of yourself, this spark of light, of hope, willingly to break the cycle of the Evernight? Would you give up what remained of your humanity, your identity, to gain the knowledge you sought, to free yourself from the hunger that had consumed you for so long? You reached out with your mind, your soul, toward the monument. The energy swirled around you, the hum of power growing louder, the light from the monument's eyes blinding, until you felt as if your very being was being pulled into the stone itself. It was an irresistible force, one that you could not fight. You have made your choice, the voice whispered, its tone both final and eternal. The hunger has always been a part of you, but it will not claim you now. The truth awaits you. The fire, the shadows, the Evernight, they will no longer be your masters. But remember this, there is always a price. And the truth, once learned, cannot be forgotten. The light from the monument surged, wrapping around you like a cocoon, its energy flooding every fiber of your being. For a moment, everything went white, blinding, suffocating, overwhelming. The hunger, the darkness, the very weight of the Evernight seemed to collapse in on itself, leaving nothing but light. And in that light you felt yourself changing. The transformation was not physical, it was deeper, more profound. The hunger that had once ruled you, that had consumed you from the inside out, was still there, but it was no longer you. It was a part of the world, a force beyond your control, but you were no longer bound to it. You were no longer a slave to the cycle. As the light dimmed, the air cleared, and the monument before you faded, leaving only the strange, shimmering trees and the fog that still clung to the ground. The clearing was silent now, the oppressive weight of the hunger gone. You stood alone but not empty. You had given up a part of yourself, but you had gained something far greater, the knowledge of the Evernight, the truth behind its endless hunger, and a glimpse of a path beyond it. You turned away from the monument, no longer shackled by the darkness that had followed you for so long. The forest around you felt different now, less oppressive, more alive. There was a faint sense of peace, like the calm after a storm. The hunger still lurked in the shadows, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it once had been. And now you had a choice. You could continue forward into the unknown with the knowledge you had gained, or you could return to the place where it all began. The choice was yours. The path you walked now was no longer defined by the hunger, no longer shaped by the cycle of the Evernight. You had broken free, but what would you do with your newfound freedom? As you stood there, staring out into the mist, the weight of your decision finally sank in. There would be no easy answers. There would be no simple escape. But you had taken the first step toward something greater, something beyond the hunger. The journey was far from over. The fog swirled around you as you stepped away from the monument, each breath you took seeming to draw in the cold, thick air of the forgotten forest. The hum of power that had surrounded you moments ago was fading, replaced by the quiet whispers of the trees. The shadows of the Evernight still clung to the edges of your vision, like an ancient stain that refused to fade, but they no longer had the same grip on your soul. The hunger, that endless gnawing void that had once defined you, was there, but it was distant, like a lingering echo fading into the vastness of the forest. Your mind was clearer now. The weight of the choice you had made was settling in, like the dust of an old book falling away to reveal a new page. You had given up something precious, something integral to who you had been, but you had also gained something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom from the cycle of hunger, freedom from the endless darkness that had gnawed at the edges of your consciousness, pushing you ever deeper into the void. But the question remained, what would you do with this freedom? As you continued to move forward through the mist, the fog thickened, shrouding the path before you. The trees, once shimmering with an ethereal glow, now seemed darker, their twisted branches stretching out like the fingers of some forgotten god. The air had become heavy, as if the very forest was holding its breath. There was something waiting for you here, something you could not yet comprehend. The path ahead was unmarked, uncertain, and yet it was the only one before you now. The ground beneath your feet had begun to change as well. The once smooth, solid earth now felt uneven, as if the forest itself was shifting with each step you took. The trees, though dark and ancient, seemed to move, their trunks bending in ways that defied the natural order, as if they were watching you, judging you. Their branches creaked and groaned with an unnatural wind that wasn't there, and you could hear the faintest murmurs in the air, voices, whispers. You had the distinct sense that you were not alone. A chill crawled up your spine, but you pushed it away. There was no going back now. You had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. The hunger still lingered in your chest, a dull, persistent throb, but now you knew it was not a part of you. It was something else, a force beyond your control, an ancient hunger that had claimed many before you. You were free of it, but it had not been eradicated. It was merely waiting, watching, like a predator circling from the edges of the forest. A flicker of light appeared in the distance, cutting through the mist like a blade of silver. It was faint at first, barely visible against the dark backdrop of trees, but it grew brighter as you walked toward it. The light felt warm, welcoming even. The longer you gazed at it, the more familiar it seemed. It reminded you of the fire you had seen in the clearing, the one that had called to you before, just as the Evernight had. But this light was different. It was not the warmth of the Evernight's illusion, the fleeting warmth that would inevitably fade. This light felt real, grounded in something ancient, something that predated the hunger. Your steps quickened as you moved toward the source of the light, the fog parting before you like a curtain drawn back to reveal a secret. As you approached, the trees cleared, revealing an open space, a grove perhaps, where the mist had thinned and the air seemed to hum with life. In the center of the grove stood a structure unlike any you had ever seen. It was made of stone, but the stone was unlike any earthly rock. It shimmered in the dim light, catching reflections from the sky above, casting soft glows onto the ground. It was a building of some kind, perhaps a temple, perhaps a sanctuary, but it was not of the world you knew. Its shape was alien, its walls covered in intricate, flowing symbols that seemed to shift and change as you looked at them, like living runes written in a language long forgotten. The light that filled the grove seemed to emanate from the structure itself, pulsing gently, as if the very walls of the building were alive with energy. The air smelled faintly of flowers, sweet, delicate, but there was an undercurrent of something more primal, something that tugged at your soul, urging you forward. For a moment you hesitated. What was this place? What was the purpose of this strange temple? And why, of all places, had you been led here? The voice had said you would find the truth, but truth about what? And what would it cost you? You could feel the presence of the hunger in the back of your mind, its whisper a constant reminder that it was not gone. You had shed its weight, but it had not disappeared. It still lingered, still waited, and you could sense that whatever was inside this structure, whatever truths it held, would lead you closer to understanding, to truly breaking free from the cycle. But you couldn't ignore the warning that echoed in your mind. What would you have to sacrifice to uncover the truth? With that thought pressing down on you, you stepped forward, the ground beneath your feet shifting with each step, as if the earth itself were reacting to your presence. The air grew thick with anticipation, the energy in the grove intensifying the closer you got to the temple. The symbols on the walls seemed to move faster now, swirling around the stone like currents in a river, their meaning just out of reach. You reached the entrance, a large archway framed by two towering stone pillars. The pillars were covered in carvings, their intricate designs telling stories of beings and events long forgotten, figures both human and otherworldly, standing in defiance of forces far greater than themselves. As you looked at them, you felt a sense of recognition, a deep, primal knowing that these were the same forces that had brought you to this place. The Evernight, the hunger, the cycle. You stepped through the archway, the light from the temple enveloping you, filling your senses. The air inside was warm, unlike the cool mist that had surrounded you outside. The space was vast, open, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls were lined with more symbols, more carvings, each one telling a story that tugged at the edges of your mind, each one promising answers. At the far end of the chamber stood a stone altar, ancient and worn, yet still emanating a powerful presence. On the altar, a crystal, large, clear, and glowing with an inner fire, rested, pulsing softly in time with the energy around you. You felt its pull. The crystal was the source of the light, the source of the power that had drawn you here. And yet, you also felt the hunger, still there, waiting, reaching toward it, yearning for its energy. You knew what this was. The crystal was a key to unlocking the truth, to breaking the cycle, but it would not come without a cost. To touch it, to wield its power, you would have to make a final choice. Would you embrace the truth with all its pain and sacrifice, or would you turn away, allowing the hunger to claim you once more? The chamber was silent, the weight of your decision pressing down on you. The crystal pulsed, waiting for you to act, waiting for you to choose. Would you reach out for it? Would you take that final step into the unknown and let the truth consume you? The crystal before you seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own, each beat like the quiet thrum of a heartbeat deep within your chest. Its glow was both mesmerizing and overwhelming, a soft yet intense light that filled the chamber with an almost tangible warmth. It beckoned you closer, its light drawing you in like a moth to a flame, but with each step you took toward it, the weight of your choice grew heavier, more suffocating. You had come so far, through the suffocating darkness of the Evernight, through the hunger that had gnawed at your soul for what felt like an eternity. You had crossed into the forgotten realm, made an offering of yourself and broken the cycle, but now the final piece lay before you, the truth. The crystal was not just an object, it was a key to understanding everything that had brought you here, to understanding the hunger, the void, and the forces that had driven you into this dark corner of existence. But the question remained, was the truth worth the price? The voice from the monument echoed in your mind once again, its tone filled with both warning and promise. The truth is not always what you think it is, it murmured. You seek answers, but what if the answers you find are not the ones you desire? What if the truth you uncover leads only to more questions, more sacrifices? You shivered at the thought. The truth. You had craved it for so long, desperate to understand why the hunger had taken you, why you had been consumed by a force you could not control. But now, faced with the crystal, the weight of that desire felt different. Was it really the truth you sought? Or was it something deeper, something more primal, more dangerous? You could feel the hunger still lurking in the shadows of your mind, its tendrils reaching out toward the crystal, as if it could sense the power within it. It wanted to consume it, to claim it for itself. It whispered to you, urging you to take it, to use its power, to control the hunger, to finally quench the thirst that had driven you to this point. You could have it all, the hunger whispered. The power of the crystal, the knowledge it holds. You could wield it and become something greater, something more than human. No more weakness. No more hunger. The voice sounded seductive, promising an end to the torment that had plagued you for so long. The hunger had been your constant companion, but if you took the crystal, you could end it. You could be free of it, no longer a slave to its gnawing, ceaseless desire. The thought was tempting, almost intoxicating. How long had you fought this darkness? How much of yourself had you sacrificed to keep it at bay? Could you really walk away from the power that lay before you? You reached out, your fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The moment your skin made contact with it, the chamber seemed to come alive. The light of the crystal flared brightly, blinding you for a moment, and the air around you crackled with energy. The walls of the temple seemed to pulse in rhythm with the crystal, and the whispers, those distant murmurs you had heard since entering this place, grew louder, more distinct. You have come far, a new voice spoke, and this one was not from the monument. It was softer, more intimate, like a whisper right next to your ear. But remember this, the truth will change you. It will reveal what you truly are, not who you were, but who you have always been. The voice faded, leaving only the pulse of the crystal, the soft rhythm that seemed to beat in time with your heart. And in that moment you understood. The hunger, the darkness, it had been a part of you all along, but it was not all that you were. The crystal held the power to show you everything, to reveal the origins of the Evernight, the hunger, and the void that had consumed so many before you. But it also held the power to reveal yourself. Your true self, beyond the hunger, beyond the darkness. It was not just the truth you sought, but the truth of what you had become. The crystal's glow dimmed slightly, its energy shifting, changing. You could feel the pull, the temptation, urging you to reach deeper, to take more, to use it. But there was a fear within you now, something that had been buried beneath the hunger all along. A fear of what you would find if you let the crystal reveal everything. What if the truth was too much to bear? What if uncovering the origins of the hunger, the Evernight, and the endless cycle was too much for your fragile mind to comprehend? Would you be able to handle the weight of it? Could you truly break free from the hunger if you understood its true nature? But it was too late for hesitation. The choice had already been made. You had touched the crystal, and in doing so, you had unlocked its power. The truth was now inevitable. The air around you crackled, the energy rising like a storm. A bright flash of light erupted from the crystal, surrounding you, blinding you to everything else. For a moment, you felt as if you were falling, plunging into the depths of a vast, infinite chasm, the light and darkness colliding around you in a dizzying swirl. Then the world stopped. You were no longer in the temple, no longer in the forest. You were standing in a place that defied all understanding, an endless void that stretched on in every direction, as if the universe itself had been torn apart and scattered into oblivion. The hunger was gone, replaced by an overwhelming silence, the absence of everything, the lack of form or substance. And then, slowly, images began to form. You saw yourself, not as you were, but as you had been. The memories flooded back in a rush, too many to process at once. You saw yourself as a child, running through a forest that seemed strangely familiar. You saw the face of someone you had loved, someone who had been lost to you long ago. The images shifted, distorted, showing flashes of battles, of pain, of moments where the hunger had first taken root in your soul. You saw the birth of the Evernight, its creation, its insatiable hunger spreading across the world, consuming everything in its path. And you saw something else, a figure standing in the distance, shrouded in shadows. Its face was obscured, but you could feel its presence. It was familiar and yet foreign. This figure was the one who had brought the hunger into the world, the one who had set the cycle in motion, the one who had chosen you. The figure stepped forward, its form coalescing into clarity, and when it spoke, its voice echoed through your mind with a chilling finality. "You are me," it said, its voice cold, unfeeling. "And I am you. We are bound by the hunger, by the void. But you, unlike all the others before you, have the power to choose." The figure raised its hand, and the world around you trembled. Will you embrace your true nature, or will you defy it? And in that moment you understood. The hunger, the void, the cycle. It was not something that had been forced upon you. It had always been a part of you. You were not a victim, not a mere pawn in some cosmic game. You were the architect of your own fate. The question was no longer what the hunger was, but what you would become. The choice was yours. The world around you flickered, as though it were not truly solid, but a projection of your own fragmented thoughts. Each pulse of light, each whisper of shadow, seemed to twist reality, leaving you in a place where time and space had no meaning. The figure before you, this reflection of yourself, loomed larger, its presence as undeniable as the pull of gravity. It was not just a figure, it was you. It was everything you had been, everything you had done, and everything you were yet to become. The figure's voice echoed in your mind again, its words lingering in the vast emptiness that surrounded you. You are me. We are one and the same, bound by the hunger, bound by the very void that has shaped us. It was a revelation, yet it felt more like a curse. Everything you had feared, the hunger, the darkness, the gnawing emptiness, had never been something imposed upon you. It had always been within you. The figure standing before you was not a twisted version of yourself. It was your true essence. The hunger was not some external force, but the dark reflection of your own soul, the part of you that had always yearned for something more, something greater than your own fragile existence. It was a truth that left you breathless. You had thought of the hunger as a curse, as something that had trapped you in a cycle of despair, a never-ending spiral of desire. But what if it was simply a manifestation of your own deepest desires, of your own need for power, control, and certainty in a world that offered none? What if it was the shadow of your soul, cast long and dark by the very forces that had shaped you? The figure raised its hand, its eyes, empty, hollow, fixating on you with an intensity that made your heart race. You have sought the truth, and now you stand before it. The voice was colder now, as if the figure itself were less a being and more an embodiment of the very forces that had brought you here. But this truth does not come without a price. We are bound by the hunger. It cannot be cast off, not fully. It is the heart of our existence. The question now is not whether we can rid ourselves of it, but whether we will embrace it fully and take control of our fate. A shiver ran through you. Was this the choice you had feared all along? To accept the hunger, to let it define you once more, but this time on your terms? You could feel its pull deep within, like a dark river flowing through your veins, urging you to give in, to let the hunger consume you completely, and in doing so, gain unimaginable power. The figure's hollow eyes glinted as if it knew your thoughts. But there is another path. The voice softened, becoming almost sympathetic. You can refuse the hunger. You can sever the bond. It will not be easy. It will be painful. But you can transcend it, rise above it. In doing so, you will free yourself from the cycle of darkness that has ensnared us both. You will be something more, something whole. You hesitated, torn between two overwhelming urges. The hunger had been a part of you for so long. To sever that connection, to let go of the dark, comforting pull of power, to walk away from the endless desire that had shaped you, was terrifying. But at the same time, the thought of truly breaking free, of freeing yourself from the hunger's grasp, was intoxicating. Was it possible to exist without it? Could you truly walk away from the very thing that had defined your existence? The figure before you seemed to shimmer and distort, as if it were not truly a being, but a mirror of your own soul, fragmented and twisted by time and desire. The hunger is part of you, it whispered, its voice now filled with a haunting sadness. It always has been. To sever it completely would be to sever your essence. But if you choose the path of transcendence, you must be willing to lose yourself, to become something more, something beyond the hunger. The image of the figure rippled, and for a moment you saw something else. A vision, a glimpse of the world outside this void. It was a world you recognized, yet it seemed so distant, so foreign. The trees, the sky, the endless stretch of wilderness. But something was different. There was no hunger there, no gnawing void. It was a world where peace existed, where the balance between light and darkness was not defined by hunger or consumption, but by something more serene. The hunger within you stirred, its presence a constant, gnawing pulse, pushing you to reach for it. But there was another force at work now, the faint memory of what you had lost, of what you might regain if you chose to rise above the darkness. It was the glimmer of hope, the feeling of warmth, of light, of something that was not consumed by the endless cycle of hunger. You can have it all, the figure's voice called, its tone growing stronger, more insistent. Power, control, the ability to reshape the world. The hunger will be yours to command. No longer a slave to it, but a master. You will be the ruler of your fate. The temptation was overwhelming. The hunger promised everything. It promised freedom from weakness, from pain, from fear. It was a promise of control, of dominance over the forces that had once sought to destroy you. The darkness was powerful, seductive, and for a moment you could feel yourself leaning toward it. But then, like a whisper from a distant memory, a voice inside you, your voice, reminded you of something else, something more. The hunger in all its power had never been enough. It had consumed you, shattered you, and still it left you empty. No matter how much you fed it, it was never full. It was an insatiable void, and you could never truly fill it. The choice before you was clear, yet infinitely complex. Embrace the hunger, become a god, a master of your own fate, but risk losing yourself in the process. Or sever the bond, let go of the power that had defined you for so long, and transcend, but at what cost? The figure in front of you seemed to pulse with the weight of your indecision, its hollow eyes staring into yours with an intensity that burned through your very soul. The hunger is part of you, it repeated, its voice softer now, almost gentle. But you can choose who you become. You are not bound to it forever. It is not your master. You are your own. You closed your eyes, feeling the hunger rise within you, feel its dark tendrils pulling at your heart, your soul. But beneath it, faint, fragile, you felt something else. A flicker of light. A promise of something beyond the darkness. And then, in that moment, you knew. You could not be defined by the hunger any longer. You had been consumed by it for far too long. The cycle had ruled you, shaped you, but you had the power to break free. It was time to transcend. Time to rise above the darkness, even if it meant losing everything you had known. Because in the end, what was the price of freedom? You reached forward, your hand trembling as you placed it against the figure's chest, just as it had been placed against the crystal. And in that instant you made the choice. The instant your hand touched the figure, the world around you shuddered, a crack of energy splitting the void. The pulse of the hunger, the gnawing, insatiable force that had been within you for as long as you could remember, surged in a final, desperate attempt to claim you. It felt as though your very soul was being torn in two. One part being pulled toward the darkness, toward the hunger, and the other toward something new, something beyond it. The figure, you, trembled as your essence collided with it, as if the very fabric of existence was unraveling. The cold, hollow eyes that had once held such power flickered, and for a moment they seemed to soften. You could feel it then, the weight of the choice, the cost of severing the hunger. It was not just a loss of power. It was a loss of identity, of everything you had been. The hunger had become you, and to walk away from it was to walk away from a part of yourself that had defined you for eons. But still you chose to transcend. The figure's form shimmered and warped, as if it were no longer sure of its own shape. It was not a being of flesh or bone, but a reflection of a deeper, more primal force. And as the two of you, your fractured self, merged, the truth became clear. The hunger had never truly been a part of you. It was a manifestation of your fear, your desires, your darkness. It was a shadow that had consumed your light, but now, in this moment of clarity, you understood that you were not defined by it. You were the light that had been smothered by the shadow. You were the fire that had been consumed by the void. And now you had the power to reignite it. The world around you began to fragment, each shard of reality splintering away like glass breaking into a million pieces. The hunger shrieked within you, its voice a twisted chorus of rage and fear, but you held firm. The pulse of light inside you grew stronger, brighter, and the dark figure, your reflection, began to unravel, its form fading into nothingness. With a final burst of energy, the figure collapsed inward, disintegrating into a cloud of ash that scattered on the wind. And in that moment you were alone. Completely alone. The hunger was gone, its presence no longer gnawing at the edges of your soul. The void had not claimed you, not entirely. You had taken the first step toward becoming something more, something beyond the cycle. But freedom came at a cost. As the shards of the shattered world began to reassemble, you felt yourself being pulled once more. This time not by the hunger, but by the force of the decision you had made. You were no longer a prisoner of the darkness. You were no longer bound to the evernight, but neither were you completely untouched by it. The truth, the knowledge you had gained, weighed heavy on your mind. You stood in the ruins of the void, surrounded by the crumbling remnants of a reality that had been destroyed by your choice. The ground beneath you was no longer solid. It was a vast, endless expanse of empty space, stretching on in every direction. The darkness was still present, but it had been transformed. It no longer held the same power over you. It was no longer the insatiable force that had once defined you. Now it was just another shadow, something you could face, something you could control. The hunger, now but a distant echo in your mind, no longer had the same pull. You could feel its presence, lingering in the back of your thoughts, but it was no longer a part of you. It was like a distant memory, one that could be called upon, but never fully embraced again. And yet, as you looked out across the endless void, you realized that the true test had just begun. You had severed the connection, but you were not yet free. The path before you was still uncertain, and you were still bound to the world in ways you could not yet comprehend. The void whispered, not with hunger, but with something else. Something ancient, something far older than the cycle of the evernight. You had broken the bond, but now you had to walk the path of transcendence, a path that led into the unknown. In the distance you saw something else, something that had not been there before. A faint light, shimmering through the darkness, beckoning you forward. It was a place of warmth, of peace, a place untouched by the hunger, a place that felt like home. You took a step toward it, the ground beneath your feet firm and solid once more. The light called to you, its warmth enveloping you as you moved closer. The darkness behind you seemed to fade, its oppressive weight lifting with each step. As you approached the light, the whispers of the void grew fainter, until they were nothing but a distant memory. And in that moment you realized something profound. You were not running from the darkness anymore. You were moving toward the light. But it wasn't just any light. It was the light of the truth you had uncovered, the light of your true self, beyond the hunger, beyond the void. You were not defined by the darkness, nor by the hunger that had once consumed you. You were free. And as you stepped into the light, you felt the weight of your decision settle into your soul, not as a burden but as a release. The cycle had ended. The hunger had been severed. And the path ahead, though uncertain, was yours to walk. You had transcended the hunger. Now you would learn what it truly meant to live beyond it. The light enveloped you, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, you felt whole. The moment you stepped fully into the light, you felt a shift deep within your being, like an ancient door slowly creaking open after centuries of being locked tight. The light wrapped around you, filling you with warmth and clarity, chasing away the lingering shadows of hunger and fear that still clung to the edges of your consciousness. It was a profound sense of peace, as though you had finally reached the place where you truly belonged, where the cycle of longing, the endless pursuit of something just beyond your reach, had ended. The void, which had once seemed so endless and oppressive, faded into the distance, leaving you standing in the heart of this new reality. The world around you was unlike anything you had ever seen before. It was not a place of land and sky, nor was it a world bound by the physical laws you had known. Instead, it was a place of pure energy, of shifting light and soft, flowing colors that defied description. The air was thick with warmth, but it was a warmth that didn't burn. It soothed like the embrace of an old friend you hadn't seen in lifetimes. In the distance, a river of light wound through the landscape, flowing like liquid silver, reflecting the hues of the sky above, colors you had never known existed, as though the world itself had been painted in shades that were impossible to name. The river's gentle flow was a constant murmur, soothing and calm. You could feel its pull, but it was not a force of hunger or desire. It was a gentle invitation, a beckoning, calling you to follow its path. The land itself seemed alive with energy, every blade of grass, every stone, every whisper of air imbued with a quiet, eternal hum, as though everything here was connected in a way that defied your understanding. The earth beneath your feet was soft, like walking on moss, but it held a firm, grounding presence. There was stability here, a contrast to the shifting chaos you had once known. You paused for a moment, taking it all in. It felt like a dream, but the warmth on your skin, the clarity in your mind, the steady pulse of energy beneath your feet, these things felt real. They felt like the truth. The hunger, the void, the endless yearning you had carried with you for so long, those things were no longer a part of you. They had been left behind, erased in a way. The peace you felt was not the result of forgetting, but of transcending. You had become something more than what you had once been. Still, something stirred within you, a curiosity, a question. You had severed the bond with the hunger, but now you had to understand what this place was, what you were becoming, and how it would all shape the path ahead. As you moved forward, the light around you seemed to respond to your every step, shifting and undulating like a living thing. The air hummed with soft, melodic sounds, like a distant song that had been playing for eternity. But this song was not sorrowful, nor was it joyous. It was a song of balance, of harmony, like the music of the spheres, played on the strings of the universe itself. A figure appeared before you, a being of light, its form shimmering like a living constellation. It was neither male nor female, neither human nor animal. It was simply an entity of pure, radiant energy, its presence warm and comforting, like the glow of a fire that you could never touch but could always feel. It spoke, its voice like the merging of wind, light, and music, a voice that resonated deep within your soul, as though it were speaking not with words, but with the very essence of existence itself. "You have come far," it said, "farther than most ever do. You have broken free from the cycle, transcended the hunger, and now, You stand in a place that is neither of the past nor the future. You stand in the realm of potential, of what is, what could be, and what might never be. You swallowed, your throat dry despite the warm, soothing air. What is this place? The figure's light flickered, its form shifting slightly, as though it were considering how best to answer. This place is not bound by time or space as you understand it. It is the space between all things, the place where everything begins and where it all eventually returns. Here, the forces of the evernight, the hunger, are but distant memories. You are no longer defined by those forces. The words filled you with a quiet sense of awe, yet a part of you was still filled with questions. But what happens now? What am I to do here? The figure's form seemed to grow even brighter, and you could feel its energy surrounding you, not suffocating, but embracing you with warmth and understanding. Now, it said softly, now you must choose what you will become. Here there are no rules, no expectations, no chains to bind you. You are free to shape your existence, to define your own path. But know this, there is no going back. You are no longer who you once were, and the world you left behind, the hunger, the cycle, will never return. A flood of emotions surged within you, fear, hope, uncertainty, exhilaration. You had left behind everything you had known, everything that had once shaped you. You were standing on the precipice of something new, something unimaginable. But what could you be in a place like this? What purpose could you have here, beyond the endless cycle of hunger and desire? The figure continued, its voice gentle but resolute. You will never be alone here, for all things are connected in the space between. You will find others who have also broken free, others who have transcended the cycle in their own ways. But remember, your path is yours alone to walk. You will decide what your purpose is, what you will become. You will find the light within yourself and see the potential that lies ahead. The thought of freedom, of shaping your own destiny, was both thrilling and terrifying. For so long, you had been a prisoner to the hunger, to the cycle, to the forces beyond your control. Now, in this vast, radiant realm, you were truly free. But what did freedom mean when there was nothing to guide you? When there were no boundaries, no rules, no hunger to drive you? You turned, looking toward the shimmering river of light in the distance. It seemed to beckon, inviting you to follow its path, but you understood now that you were not bound to it. The river would not define you. It would not force you in one direction or another. The figure, sensing your uncertainty, spoke again, its voice reassuring. You are free, but you are also whole. You have transcended, but you have not abandoned who you were. The hunger is gone, yes, but the essence of who you are remains. You are still you. And now you will shape that self anew. A warm breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar, perhaps flowers, perhaps something deeper. The wind whispered to you, not with words, but with a feeling, a sense of infinite possibilities. You knew then what you must do. You had transcended the hunger, the cycle. But you were not done. You were not finished. This was only the beginning of your journey, the first step toward becoming something beyond what you had ever imagined. You raised your head, feeling the light envelop you, and made your first step toward the river of light. With each step you took toward the river of light, you could feel the energy around you responding to your presence. The world itself seemed to shift, the colors deepening, the air growing richer with possibilities. You were no longer bound to the cycle of hunger, to the endless cravings that had once ruled you, but the question now lingered, what would you choose to become? The river, winding through the vast landscape of energy, gleamed like liquid starlight, reflecting the shimmering colors of the world around it. As you approached, the air hummed with a low, harmonious vibration, like the world itself was singing a song you had always known but could never quite remember. It was a song of life, of balance, of the dance between light and shadow. The figure of light, still standing behind you, remained silent for a moment, as though giving you space to breathe, to absorb the magnitude of the decision you were about to make. But then, in its soft, melodic voice, it spoke again. The river represents the flow of your potential, it said. It is the path that stretches out before you, the direction that guides your becoming. But remember, it is not a predetermined course. You are not bound to it as you were once bound to the hunger. You are free to shape it, to bend it, to choose where it leads. You looked down at the river, its surface rippling with a light that seemed to reach deep within you, touching parts of your soul that had been dormant, buried under the weight of the hunger and the void. The current was gentle, but it carried with it a sense of purpose, of direction. Yet you knew deep down that the true choice lay not in following the river's path but in deciding whether to step into it at all. What if I do not wish to follow it? You asked, your voice tentative, but filled with the curiosity of one who has been freed from a long imprisonment. What if I wish to carve my own path, to find my own way? The figure of light seemed to smile, though its face remained formless, its glow a shifting pattern of colors. "Then you will create your own path," it replied. "The river is not a prison. It is a guide, a suggestion, but not a command. It is the reflection of your potential, but the true power lies in what you choose to do with it. You are the creator of your own destiny, the architect of your becoming. No longer will you be shaped by forces beyond your control. The choices you make here will shape the fabric of your new existence." The weight of those words sank into your being like a seed planted in fertile soil. You were no longer a slave to the hunger, nor to the cycles of darkness that had once defined your life. Now, in this place beyond time and space, you stood at the edge of the river, the very source of your potential. The question was not what you would become, but who you would choose to be. As you stared into the river, you could see flashes of possibilities like reflections in a mirror. Each ripple of the water revealed glimpses of what lay ahead. There were paths of light, paths of shadow, paths of balance, each one calling to you with its own promise, its own allure. You saw versions of yourself that were filled with wisdom, with peace, with power. You saw versions that were still burdened by the weight of the past, haunted by the echoes of the hunger you had left behind. But what truly caught your attention was the one that was still becoming, the version of yourself that had not yet fully formed, the one that had the potential to walk any path, to choose any destiny. That was the version that drew you in, the one that held the key to your future. "Will you join the river?" the figure asked, its voice a soft murmur like the breeze on a calm evening. "Or will you carve a new path, one of your own making?" Your heart pounded in your chest as you considered the question. The river was beautiful, and it promised purpose, clarity, a direction. But there was a certain allure in the idea of creating something entirely new, something that would not be bound by the constraints of the past, not even by the hunger that had once consumed you. The figure seemed to sense your hesitation and, with a calm, knowing energy, added, "Remember, creation is not without its challenges. To carve a new path means to embrace uncertainty. It means forging your own way step by step. It is not the easiest journey, but it is the truest to your nature. The river, though it offers its wisdom, will always be shaped by what you choose. But creating your own path, that is the journey of becoming. It is the highest form of freedom." The river seemed to pulse at that moment as if to encourage you, but the choice remained yours alone. You could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on you, each option filled with its own rewards and risks. If you followed the river, you would walk a path that had been forged by others, shaped by forces you could not yet fully understand. But if you carved your own path, you would be a true pioneer, creating a reality that had never been dreamed before. You would be free, but you would also be alone in that freedom, without the guidance of those who had gone before you. But then, as you stood on the edge of the river, something within you shifted. You had spent so long being a prisoner to forces beyond your control. The hunger, the void, the cycle, they had all shaped you, molded you into something defined by the past. But now you were free. You were whole. And the possibilities before you were endless. The light around you seemed to grow brighter, and you felt a pull toward the river. It was not the pull of hunger, not the insatiable need to devour and consume, but something different. A pull toward the unknown, a desire to explore, to experience, to create. You stepped forward, your feet grazing the edge of the river, feeling the energy of it flow through you. You did not have to decide yet. You could feel the river waiting for you, but also the possibility of forging your own way, creating something entirely new. The figure, watching you with its eternal wisdom, nodded as if understanding your thoughts. "You do not have to choose now," it said, its voice serene. "The river is always there, waiting. But the path you take will reveal itself when you are ready. For now, simply step forward. Trust in your own becoming." And so, you took your first step into the river, not to follow its path, but to step into the flow of your own potential. You felt the current swirl around your feet, but it did not drag you. It did not pull you under. It simply supported you, guiding you without forcing you to follow. You realized, as you stepped deeper into the river, that this was not a place of destiny. It was a place of choice. You were free. You were the creator. And with each step you took, the world around you seemed to change, to expand, to evolve. The path before you would not be easy, but it would be yours. The river swirled around your legs, its liquid light flowing like liquid stardust, smooth and warm against your skin. With each step, you felt a deeper connection to it, but not as a follower. No, you were something different now. You were a creator, a being of infinite potential, standing at the cusp of your own reality. The current, while gentle, was filled with the whispers of endless possibilities, like the sound of distant echoes in a cavern, all calling out to you, inviting you to shape your own world. The air around you was thick with energy, crackling with the potential of every choice yet to be made. The river itself pulsed, its surface shimmering with the reflection of countless futures. You could see flashes of yourself, versions of you that had followed different paths, each one taking on a unique form, a different purpose. Some were filled with peace, others with power. Some were still weighed down by remnants of the hunger, while others had transcended it entirely. But it was not the visions of your past selves that intrigued you. It was the fact that you, the version of you that stood here now, had the power to shape the course of your own existence. The world, this space between realms, was open to you. Every step you took was a step closer to creating the future, not just for yourself, but for the world around you. As you continued deeper into the river, the landscape around you began to shift, like the fluid motion of an artist's brush across a canvas. The colors deepened, and the air became thicker, heavier with potential. You felt the weight of creation in your chest, a hum that resonated deep within you. It was like standing at the edge of the void, knowing that whatever you decided to create next would be shaped by your very will. And then you saw something, a figure in the distance standing alone in the flowing river. It was the figure of light, no longer simply an ethereal being, but something more tangible now, more real. It seemed to be waiting for you, its presence calm and knowing. "I see you are ready," the figure said, its voice a harmonic blend of light and sound. "You have chosen to step beyond the river, to embrace the path of creation. But know this, the journey ahead is not without its challenges. Creation is not an act of ease, but one of will. It is a forging, a continual process of shaping and remaking. But it is also the truest freedom, the deepest truth. It is the expression of your essence." You stepped closer to the figure, your heart racing with the weight of what lay before you. "What do I do now?" you asked. "How do I begin?" The figure's light flickered in what might have been a smile, its radiance growing brighter in response to your words. "Creation is not simply a process of molding what already is," it said, its voice soft yet powerful. "It is an act of bringing something from nothing, of birthing a reality that has never been before. You have the power to shape this place, to shape yourself, to bring forth worlds and possibilities. You are the forger of your own destiny." The river around you seemed to stretch on infinitely, no longer simply a stream, but a vast expanse of light, a canvas awaiting your touch. You could feel the energy of the river surging through your veins, like molten metal, ready to be shaped into whatever form you desired. Every step you took forward felt like you were walking into the very heart of creation itself. "The first step is understanding this place," the figure continued, gesturing toward the river. "This is the forge of creation where all things come into being. You are the blacksmith, the artist, the weaver of worlds. And your first task is to understand the tools at your disposal." With a wave of its hand, the river before you began to split, forming two distinct paths. The left path shimmered with golden light, while the right path glowed with a soft, ethereal blue. Each path seemed to pulse with a different kind of energy, each one calling out to you in a different way. "The golden path," the figure explained, "is the path of creation from order, structure, and stability. It represents the foundation of all things, the laws that govern existence. If you choose this path, you will create with precision, with intent. The structures you forge will be durable, lasting, unyielding in their form. It is a path of logic, of purpose, of meaning." You could feel the pull of the golden path, its order, its calm, its promise of stability. It spoke to the part of you that had once been defined by the hunger for control, for mastery. The golden path offered the promise of creating a world governed by rules, a world where everything had a place, a purpose. "The blue path," the figure continued, "is the path of creation from chaos, from potential. It represents the fluidity of the universe, the boundless possibilities that exist when you let go of structure and embrace uncertainty. If you choose this path, you will create with imagination, with instinct. The worlds you create will be malleable, shifting, evolving in unexpected ways. It is a path of freedom, of innovation, of discovery." The blue path seemed to shimmer with possibility, its hues shifting like liquid sky. It felt like the wild unknown, an invitation to forge something entirely new, to experiment, to explore the limits of creation. The blue path offered the freedom to shape and reshape without limitation, a world without boundaries or rules. You stood between the two paths, your heart racing with the weight of the decision. The golden path promised order, stability, and control, but the blue path promised freedom, creativity, and the potential to create something unlike anything that had ever existed. Both paths were filled with promise, but both also came with their own challenges. The figure of light watched you, its presence calm and understanding. "The choice is yours," it said. But remember, creation is not just about the path you choose, it is about the energy you bring to it. You are the force that will shape this reality. And as you step forward, you will imbue it with your essence, your will. So ask yourself, what do you wish to create? What will your first step bring into being? The world around you seemed to wait, holding its breath, as if the very fabric of reality was waiting for you to make your choice. You could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on you, each path filled with its own allure, its own dangers, its own potential. You closed your eyes, and for a moment, the hunger, the gnawing emptiness that had plagued you for so long, felt like a distant memory, something that no longer held any sway over you. This was your moment. You were free. You were the creator. With a deep breath, you opened your eyes, and the world, your world, was yours to shape. The weight of the choice hung in the air like a dense fog, but as you stood there at the crossroads of creation, something inside you shifted. You had transcended the hunger, freed yourself from the shackles of the past, and now, for the first time, you were faced with the most powerful choice of all, the way you would shape reality itself. The very essence of the world, the forge of creation, was at your fingertips, ready to be molded, but the direction you chose would set the stage for everything that came after. For a long moment, you stood still, your gaze moving between the shimmering golden path and the flowing blue path. The paths stretched out before you, extending into the infinite horizon, each one beckoning with the promise of something powerful, something transformative. You could feel both the stability of the golden path and the wild, uncontained potential of the blue path. Both were deeply alluring, both contained worlds of possibility. The golden path was the path of certainty, the path of rules and order, the promise of control. It spoke to the part of you that had once been consumed by the hunger for mastery over your surroundings, a hunger that had driven you to transcend it in the first place. It felt like a return to the familiar, the known. You could shape a world where everything had a place, where every creation was structured, purposeful, lasting. A world where the laws of nature were unyielding and balance was maintained. On the other hand, the blue path was the path of chaos, of freedom. It was the path of limitless potential, where creation was not bound by any form, any rule, or any structure. It promised a world where everything could be fluid, constantly changing, evolving in unexpected ways. It would be a world of experimentation, of innovation, where the boundaries of possibility were only limited by your imagination. The figure of light remained silent, standing by the edge of the river, its form a beacon of calm in the midst of your turmoil. It was as if it were waiting for you to come to the realization on your own, as if it were not the choice that mattered most, but the way in which you made it. And then, without warning, a new thought washed over you. A spark of understanding ignited deep within your mind, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted to reveal a deeper truth. The figure had spoken of creating with your will, of shaping the world with your essence. But what if the act of creation was not about choosing one path over the other? What if creation was not an either-or choice, but something far more intricate? What if the two paths were meant to be woven together, a tapestry of order and chaos, of structure and fluidity, to form something even greater than the sum of its parts? In that moment you understood. Creation was not the result of a single path, but of balance. The two paths, the golden and the blue, were not opposites, but complementary forces, each one essential to the other. To create something truly unique, something truly whole, you needed both. You needed the stability of the golden path to provide the foundation, and the chaos of the blue path to give it life, to let it breathe and evolve. This revelation struck you like a thunderclap. The realization that you didn't have to choose between the two paths. The realization that you could weave them together, blending the stability of order with the untamed energy of chaos, filled you with a deep, resonant power. You no longer felt torn between two choices. Instead, you saw them as two threads in the infinite weave of creation, each one essential to the fabric of the universe. You took a step forward, not toward one path or the other, but toward the river itself, toward the source of all creation. The figure of light watched you silently, its presence unwavering, as if it had always known you would find this truth. You understand, the figure said, its voice full of quiet approval. Astor's creation is not a binary choice. It is an art of balance, of weaving together opposing forces to form something greater than the sum of its parts. It is the fusion of order and chaos, structure and fluidity, logic and imagination. You have the power to shape the world, not by following one path alone, but by embracing both. By weaving them together, you will create something new, something alive. As the figure spoke, the river before you began to shimmer and shift, the golden and blue energies blending together, swirling in a dance of light. It was as if the two paths you had once seen as separate were now merging, intertwining, creating a new unified force. The current surged, its waters now reflecting both the warmth of golden light and the deep, mysterious blues of the untamed cosmos. The river was no longer just a symbol of potential. It had become a dynamic, living force, a fusion of everything you were capable of creating. You reached out to touch the river, and as your fingers skimmed the surface, something extraordinary happened. The river seemed to respond to you, flowing into you, filling you with an overwhelming surge of energy. It was as if the very currents of creation itself had found a new vessel, a new conduit in you. The light inside you flared brightly, and you could feel it, the raw, untapped potential coursing through your veins, your very essence vibrating with the force of creation. The world around you seemed to bend and twist as you stood at the river's edge, your mind expanding beyond the limits of your form. You could feel the threads of existence, each life, each possibility, each moment, spinning and weaving together before your eyes. The future was no longer something fixed, something inevitable. It was something you could mold, shape, and transform. It was yours to create. You took a deep breath, feeling the weight of your newfound power settle in your chest. The hunger was gone. The cycle was broken. You were free to create, to shape, to forge something new, something unique. The figure of light spoke once more, its voice a soft echo in the vastness of your mind. This is your moment, the moment where you truly become. The power is yours. What will you create? The question hung in the air, and as you stood there, surrounded by the infinite possibilities of creation, you felt a deep sense of wonder. You were no longer constrained by the forces of the hunger, by the limits of the past, or by the weight of fate. You were a creator. The possibilities were endless, the future unwritten. Your heart beat steadily in your chest, and you knew deep down that whatever you chose to create, it would be something beautiful. The immense power of creation thrummed through you like a living force, alive and buzzing beneath your skin, waiting to burst forth into existence. The world around you pulsed with the raw energy of possibility, and you felt it, you, standing at the very center of it all. This place was not just a realm of potential. It was the canvas of existence itself, waiting for your touch to bring it to life. You looked out across the river, now a swirling dance of golden light and deep, cosmic blue, and felt the vastness of it stretch out in every direction. It was no longer a simple stream, but an infinite current of potential. The river had become the weave of reality itself, a living thread that bound all things together, the very fabric of existence. And you were the weaver. The figure of light stood at the edge of the river, its form still shifting in the gentle glow of the flowing waters. It had no face, no features, only a presence that seemed to embody everything that had come before and everything that would come after. Now that you have embraced the balance, the figure said, its voice like the wind through trees, soft yet powerful, now you must choose how to weave the threads. The river offers you endless possibilities, but it is you who must decide how to spin them. You are the artist. You are the creator. And creation is not an act of force, but of intention. The weight of its words sank into your being. You were the creator now. You had the power to shape, to mold, to form the very essence of the universe with your will, but it wasn't a power to be wielded recklessly. No, creation was delicate, intricate, like the weaving of a tapestry where every thread had its place, where every knot, every twist, and every choice mattered. The golden and blue energies within the river were only a beginning. What you did with them, how you chose to combine them, was up to you. You closed your eyes for a moment, feeling the river's flow within you, its currents weaving into your very soul. You could feel the threads, the fibers of reality that lay before you, waiting to be pulled, twisted, spun into something new. The river, with its balance of order and chaos, was the key to unlocking what lay hidden in your heart. Your mind expanded with the knowledge that creation was not just about forging something external. It was about shaping within yourself, within the essence of existence itself. You were not just creating a world, a reality. You were creating truth. You were shaping the laws of this new universe. You were the maker of meaning, the weaver of time, space, and everything that would exist within it. As the weight of this understanding settled over you, a realization dawned. This is where I begin. The river, the tapestry, it was not just a realm of limitless potential. It was a reflection of your very self. The world you created would be an extension of your own being, a reflection of your thoughts, desires, and deepest truths. It would be the expression of your heart. Where will you begin? The figure asked, its voice quiet now, as if giving you the space to answer. What will you create? You turned to face the river, the swirling mix of golden light and blue energy now taking on a new meaning. This river was not a mere flow of energy. It was a bridge a passage between the infinite possibilities of creation and the world you were about to shape. You understood now that you were not just choosing what to create. You were defining the world's very rules, its foundations, the patterns that would emerge from the chaos and the order. You could see it now, stretched out before you, like the threads of a loom just waiting to be woven. The potential was staggering, the choices overwhelming. Every fiber, every spark of energy had its place, but where would you start? And then a single thought struck you: balance. The answer had always been there. It had been there when you chose to embrace both order and chaos. It had been there when you felt the pull between the golden path and the blue path. Now it was clear, balance would be your guiding principle. You extended your hand toward the river, the flow of golden and blue light wrapping around your fingers, and as you did, the threads of creation began to weave before you. The energy of the river didn't overwhelm you. Instead, it folded itself into your grasp, responding to your intent, awaiting your direction. It was the first act of creation, the first deliberate movement, and it felt right. It felt natural. With a deep breath, you made your first choice. You reached out with your will and began to twist the threads of creation, pulling the energies of order and chaos into a new shape. The river before you shimmered, and with it, the world you were about to create. At first, there was no shape, no form. Just light and energy and endless possibility. But slowly, the energy began to take on structure. The golden threads twisted into lines, forming the very fabric of existence, while the blue threads spiraled, creating the free-flowing, unpredictable energy that would give the world life. From this fusion, you began to shape the first of many creations. An island, a place of foundation. It would be the heart of this new reality, a place where order and chaos could meet, a place where balance could take root. You spun the threads tighter, weaving the landscape of the island into being. The land rose from the river, solidifying with a gentle hum as hills and valleys took form. The golden threads created the structure of the land. The mountains, the rivers, the trees, each one perfectly in place, holding the laws of nature in perfect harmony. Then came the chaos, the unpredictability, the free-flowing essence that made this world alive. The blue threads shimmered, swirling through the trees, the rivers, the sky. The wind began to blow, the trees swayed in unpredictable patterns, the water rippled with movement, and the sky shifted with clouds that constantly changed form. Life would not be stagnant here. It would breathe, grow, and evolve in ways that no mind could foresee. You watched as the island took shape beneath your hands, a living, breathing world emerging from the river's flow. It was a place of balance, where creation could evolve with intent but also with the freedom to change, to grow, and to adapt. And then, with the last of your intent, you wove the final piece into existence: life. It began as a flicker of golden light, a pulse of blue energy, a spark of consciousness. The world you had created could now think, feel, and grow. The first creatures emerged from the ground, gentle beings made of light and energy, living within the balance of your creation. They moved through the world with purpose but also with freedom. They were not bound by the laws of nature but guided by them. They were reflections of the balance you had crafted, each one a fragment of the whole, each one with a role to play in the eternal dance of creation. As the creatures looked to you, their first steps guided by your will, you knew that this was just the beginning. The island, the world, and the beings within it were only the first breath of an ever-evolving universe. And you were its creator, the weaver of balance, the architect of possibility. The tapestry was still unfolding, and you were the one who would continue to shape it.